heat of the asphalt, the oily smell of tar, and the honking of cars at a busy intersection burst into his empty consciousness. At first, he couldn't even understand what he was looking at. But then he began to distinguish people who were each going about their own business. He looked at his hands, clad in black fingerless gloves, and without a doubt the body belonged to him, and this gave him a certain confidence. But everything else was worrying. Reality was mercilessly attacking him, invading with unfamiliar images, strange houses, strange pillars around which sparked with static electricity. "Where am I?" a tall young man asked himself, wearing a tight black t-shirt and military pants. His clothes did not hide the dense muscles of a well-trained fighter. A bus with mirrored, dark-tinted windows drove by, and the guy saw his reflection. Black hair, as if someone had smeared it with coal dust, and bright blue eyes. He saw this face for the first time, just like everyone else around him. The guy didn't remember who he was, where he was, or who he was. There was a crushing vacuum in his mind, as if he had been hit over the head with a club. On the right sleeve of the t-shirt was an unusual emblem with a skull and crossed knives, Special Corps. And on the other one there is another one with wings. One could assume that his uniform belongs to the military. There was a piercing ringing in his ear, and the guy reflexively swung. With a sharp, direct blow, he broke the trunk of a small tree, which spoke of the monstrous strength of this man. He himself was amazed by such abilities, watching the tree fall with a crash onto the asphalt. The eyes of random passers-by bulged from their heads at such a sight, and they shied away in horror. It was clearly not without reason that the guy realized such combat reflexes in his presence. His fist was not damaged at all by the blow. For a few moments, he simply looked at his hand, and then he heard a voice in his head, as if the interlocutor was standing right next to his ear. "Glad to greet the agent," he said. The unexpected interlocutor spoke to him in a pleasant baritone, with stern notes like a military man, but introduced himself as the combat support artificial intelligence implanted in his body. So, there is a tenant in his body. Another unexpected discovery surprised the guy, but since that was the case, he decided to ask where they were and what year it was. After evaluating the visual data, the voice assistant concluded that they were in the city of Seoul, and the year was 2024. The machine could say about itself that it was developed in 2082, which means this strange anachronism was added to the previously received information. Unfortunately, the machine couldn't tell more, having discovered the data dump, just as its implant carrier had lost his memories. However, from the very moment they appeared, they both had a significant impact on this world. The truck driver, who had been driving carefree until then, suddenly realized that the traffic lights were no longer working and slammed on the brakes. The guy's implant used his visual channel and constantly analyzed it, and it was the first to notice the threat of a collision and gave him a warning. Turning around, the time traveler saw a truck rushing towards him. The truck hit a fence, which sent a steel pipe flying off. A trained man from the future with super reflexes easily dodged the projectile, but the poor passerby walking behind him wasn't so lucky. The guy saw how the pipe pierced the man's stomach and went deep inside. People started screaming and shouting, and they immediately started calling an ambulance. The assistant interface highlighted the person and displayed his status. The guy rubbed his eyes from the unusual sensations and the strange cloud that hung in his field of vision. At first, he thought that something got into his eye, but then the assistant explained that it was part of the augmented reality that he was creating. In effect, the implant provided a complete brain-computer interface and allowed images to be projected directly into the visual cortex of the brain. And yet, despite the fact that he easily dodged the blow, a simple passerby could have died now. The red spot underneath him was rapidly growing in size, and the traveler asked if anything could be done about it. At first, the guy doubted it because he didn't know how to do that, but the neuroface could carry out a field operation. But first, it was necessary to assess the condition of the victim. "The eyes are afraid, the hands are doing," thought the special agent, and put his questions aside to examine the wounded man. The abundance of blood from the wound channel indicated that important arteries were affected, and the wound looked bad. The agent was surprised that such an operation could be carried out in the field, but the neuroface had already identified a list of tools with which he was confident he could handle it. "A needle, a thread, a small knife, and disinfectant," the agent quickly said to another passerby nearby. The man was amazed that they were going to provide first aid to the victim. He even offered to help the agent, but he still didn't know whether he could trust the capabilities of the neuroface. After questioning everyone who was nearby, they were able to get everything they needed, and the agent laid out the tools in front of him on a piece of paper. Many people were concerned about this kind of amateur activity, and quite rightly so. In the case of surgical intervention, It is important not only to properly suture damaged vessels and tissues, but also to avoid sepsis. Any dust that gets into the wound carries bacteria and viruses, which can lead to blood poisoning and kill the person being rescued. While they were whispering behind his back, the agent mentally asked his neuroface what to do next. He was going to take a risk since the victim would die anyway without intervention. The assistant then requested temporary control over the body. It was like a deal with the devil. The guy didn't know what he would have to pay for this control, or whether the alien would return control of the car to him. But the life of another person was more important than all the risks, so the agent agreed. Goosebumps and numbness ran through his body. He immediately felt like a puppeteer's toy. Now the hands moved quickly as if on their own. The neuroface took one of the needles and heated it up properly, disinfecting it at the same time, and then carefully bent it like a fish hook. Without heating, the hardened sewing needle would simply break. Then he threaded a clean thread through it, opened the wound with surgically precise finger movements, and began to stitch. The bleeding did not stop and the system issued a warning. The agent asked with concern what was going on. But the machine continued to sew the man and remained silent in response, completely absorbed in the process. Then blood spurted out of the wound again and landed on the agent's face. All anyone could do was hope the liquid didn't get into his eyes and that the bystander wasn't infected. Gloves and masks are worn during surgeries because they protect the surgeon from infection, not just the patient. This is the end, thought the silicon demon-possessed boy. Fortunately, the victim was quickly taken to the hospital and urgently operated on. After a couple of hours, the surgeon finished his work. His friend from the emergency room asked how the patient was doing, and the surgeon answered, taking a glass of instant coffee, that he would live. The wound was indeed serious, so he praised the team for stitching up the victim on the way. Otherwise, he would have died before reaching the hospital. They stitched up the main large vessels, and the surgeon dealt with the minor ones, but his colleague noticed displeasure on his face. The surgeon was indignant about why they stitched it up with ordinary thread. But that wasn't even the most outrageous thing. The stitching was close to perfect, with perfect spacing between stitches, as if the patient had been mended by a sewing machine. All this sounds strange. The doctor was surprised, and the surgeon agreed with him. He himself would not have believed it if he had not seen it with his own eyes. Then another man came up to them and said hello. He introduced himself as Park Yoon-jung and said that he was a detective investigating the circumstances of the incident. The surgeon told him that the patient's condition had stabilized and asked if it was true that the guy had been stitched up right on the street. The detective confirmed that it was not an ambulance crew, but a strange guy who asked for a stationery knife, a needle and thread, and did everything himself. This was unthinkable. Even for a real surgeon, it was a dubious practice with great responsibility. Whoever agreed to this was a real madman. And yet, all the witnesses testified to this. That guy, possibly a student, took a risk and completed the task, thereby saving the patient. The detective amazed them even more when he told them that the dashing student had made the instrument himself by bending a sewing needle. However, after the guy did everything, he disappeared without waiting for an ambulance. The three men spent a long time trying to figure out how to define this mysterious person, whether he was a genius or a madman. In a public restroom, the agent was quickly washing off the blood left on his hands when his puppeteer suddenly froze. He became frightened, thinking that he had decided to give up halfway through. But the machine was simply analyzing the states. Now they could return to the current tasks, and the agent asked the assistant if he at least knew his name. There was nothing like that, and the guy wondered what to call this combat support interface. He needed to shorten it somehow, and he decided to call the new settler Genie, like in the tale of Aladdin, since they had some similarities. That's what they decided on. Although the puppeteer clearly didn't care what his name was, he read the guy's thoughts even before he reached his own consciousness. After a short silence, the change was saved and stored in memory. The boy then began to study the emblem of the Earth Alliance Special Forces that he found on the uniform. He's a special agent and, on top of that, a time traveler. And even the genius settler couldn't say anything about how all this is connected. The guy suggested that he search for information online, but the puppeteer Jin refused. There is always a risk of hacking in such a case, so he preferred to use a human-shaped pad. He simply used all the human senses without direct input, which greatly slowed down the processes but at least eliminated hacking. He used the human body for both input and output, but this required what Jin called temporal control. Its developers took care to avoid ethical issues with the actions. The machine helped to aim at the target, but only the person did the shooting. Ultimately, his intelligence was severely limited to prevent him from breaking free, but he still remained a useful assistant. And to understand what happened to him, the agent must search the internet himself. Now he had his first task, and the world immediately became simpler. Everything was divided into a goal and tasks to achieve it. It's amazing how a person can be calmed by something that makes him akin to a machine, the guy thought. He went outside and walked a little. His feet led him to the computer club building. But to gain access there, cash was needed. In the future, everything was exactly the same as in the recent past. However, his thick army trousers, despite their deep pockets, did not contain a wallet with local currency. A plan was born in the agent's head. People always value traveling artists, and Gene had excellent control over his body, including his vocal cords. A disposable spoon appeared in the agent's hand. He pressed her to himself like a microphone, and a mask prudently appeared on his face. Before they began, the agent asked Jin how singing skill was related to combat, and he replied that raising the morale of his comrades was an important skill. But even if so, why did they gather to sing here? He asked Jin. There was already a punk rock band performing in the park, and their screams were making everyone's ears twitch. But despite this, they gathered an impressive crowd of their fans. Jin was sure that if they showed excellent skills here, it would attract an audience. But the agent expected a completely different reaction, in the spirit of the massacre of the innocents. Just in case, the guy warned Gene that, even though he was a genius puppeteer, all the shame would fall on him. "I'm starting," the machine replied coldly. But in the end, they had to move to a place where there was less noise. However, when he started his journey, even without music, taking the words and songs he heard on the radio, it was to the taste of the people in the park. Jin added some artistic dance moves and looked like a professional pop idol. It immediately attracted listeners from all over the park, so they were immediately distracted from the punk band's concert. And they were left alone with the stage. The special agent's voice sounded completely like the performer's tone, only lower, due to the military man's powerful chest. Many people liked this sound even more than the squeaky voice of the original performer. True, in some places Jin was simply improvising, since he didn't hear the song in its entirety, but only in snatches. And yet, this was enough to receive generous gratitude from fans. This money should have been enough for the first search, so the guy praised his talented puppeteer. He fled before the adoring fans could force him to sing an encore. He had no idea that the work of the advanced neural network had attracted the attention of a young and attractive woman who was watching him from the windows of a neighboring building. Her name was Inso. This sweet girl worked part-time at an internet cafe, cleaning and delivering orders. Looking at this girl, anyone would think that she belongs among popular actresses and models. Her blonde hair, big gray eyes, and stunning figure made her look cute even in a work apron. The money filled the box pleasantly, even though it was small. The way they got it was full of absurdity, but the agent didn't care. Meanwhile, the boy considered what to do next if they failed to find out anything. In that case, Jin recommended adapting and contacting headquarters. In other words, to infiltrate, the agent concluded when he came across an internet cafe. The guy immediately went inside. There was a notice at the entrance announcing the cafe was looking for a worker, and that they needed experienced applicants. It was a good way to gain entry, and the employee could also get a free meal. This job allowed them to immediately address the issue of money and food, as well as search for information in their free time. The only remaining issue was lodging. Jin promised to help with clothes and said that he had a way to do this. The current form made of new matter had the ability to change camouflage, photochromic fiber, and shape memory. He could transform it into anything. The clothes were divided into several modules and each could be controlled separately. They can be connected or separated to imitate any cut. And indeed, when the guy pulled on the sleeve, it came off easily, although before that it looked as if it was sewn on with a thin seam. "Done," said the agent, and his clothes took on the form of a punk rocker outfit from the park. This way he won't stand out, the agent thought. And then he saw two more people coming up the stairs and talking about their own things. They stared in surprise at the man walking around half naked and suddenly fell silent. Then the agent realized that his hypothesis about invisibility was false. They looked at him too closely and for too long, as if he were crazy, and their faces became very elongated. They also passed by silently. The guys avoided his gaze, as if afraid that this punk would start pestering them. They turned pale when they saw his clothes, the agent asked, and Jin agreed with him. And then they tried again, this time using the clothes of those guys as an example. It worked better, and the clothes themselves looked practical and understandable. Gene praised his choice. The cap covered his face perfectly, which is important for an agent. The settlers scanned the hall, where most of the visitors were playing computer games. There was food, a source of information, and a convenient way to pay. This was the very place they were looking for. At the counter, a worker greeted him and crossed his arms over his chest, recognizing that the guy had come to apply for a job. However, he did not take any documents or even a resume with him. However, this was not a particularly demanding position, so the employee simply told him to write a resume here and bring the documents tomorrow. It turned out that this man was the owner of the club, but due to the fact that he lacked staff, he was forced to work himself. Despite this, he still looked critically at the strong-looking guy. A pretty face didn't mean that this young man could cook anything in the kitchen. The owner asked if he knew how to cook on a stove, and the agent nodded affirmatively. After all, to monitor the condition of soldiers on the battlefield, Jin had the skill of field cooking. Then the owner decided to test the guy right away and asked him to prepare a portion of fried rice, while he himself was distracted by another customer smiling welcomingly. Neuroface quickly assessed the situation in the kitchen as if it were an operating room, and marked down all the ingredients needed for fried rice. Then another couple came in looking for a place for two, but there were no such places in the cafe, and the agent headed to the kitchen. When everything was ready, the guy handed over temporary control so that the puppeteer could prepare delicious rice. Fortunately, the data on traditional recipes had not been reset from the system, and a wave of cold tingling ran through the agent's body. The puppeteer resolutely opened the refrigerator. Jin grabbed the knife and chopper and did a few stunt spins to stretch his body and test the balance of the equipment. The owner of the cafe heard the confident sounds of cooking from the kitchen. He came in to take a look and saw the boy quickly chopping onions, as if he had been training for this for 100 years. The owner was taken aback, because he thought the guy would simply take out the semi-finished product and heat it up in the microwave. Green onions, fried bacon, and vegetables appeared on the plates. Having mixed all this in a frying pan with rice, Jin began to fry everything over high heat, constantly turning it over to prevent burning, the kitchen filled with the sweet aroma of food. And then, the puppeteer chef put everything on a clean plate and added an egg to the serving, and all this in a couple of minutes, like an uncle from Bangkok. The golden rice, fried in fat, shone brightly, and its aroma teased the nostrils boldly. Despite this, the owner still remained suspicious. No matter how fast the cook was, the food had to be tasty, otherwise it was pointless. Since everything was cooked quickly, the rice was probably raw, he thought, and put the spoonful of food into his mouth. For a few moments he simply stood there, letting the rice melt. The agent himself did not have time to try the food, so he could not verify its taste. "This won't do," said the owner, and threw the spoon on the table. "You can't eat such delicious rice without strong drinks," the owner shouted, forgetting that he was at work. For a second, he genuinely wanted to relax in some diner where the food was just as delicious. And his niece, who had just entered the kitchen, chided her uncle for being so idle in broad daylight. The owner introduced a beautiful girl. Her name was Inso. She also worked there, so he asked them to get along. When Inso came closer, her clear gray eyes widened with delight, because she recognized the guy who was singing down in the park. The disguise didn't work. The agent was horrified but didn't show it. Why would someone with such talent want to come here? Inesio wondered, and the guy replied that he was simply good at everything and hadn't yet decided what he wanted to do. Somewhere in the depths of his mind, Jin methodically noted that he was the one who was actually good. Meanwhile, the owner was overjoyed to have such an excellent chef, as his niece was too clumsy in the kitchen, either cooking raw or burning food. This greatly embarrassed Inso. He asked the guy what time he wanted to work, day or evening, and then the agent said he would like to work part-time and preferably with a flexible schedule. He also noticed their utility room and asked to live there for a while, which made him even more like an uncle from Bangkok who had nowhere to go. The owner frowned. Quite a few conditions had been put forward, but he didn't want to let the talented young man go. He was pressed by the fact that there was a competitor's cafe with good cooking nearby, so for him this was an excellent opportunity to attract new customers. So he agreed to let him sleep in the utility room, pay him double, and feed him well. But only if sales increase, the owner added. His words sounded like a fair deal. Meanwhile, a noisy couple entered the hall. The girl loudly whined that she was hungry, and her boyfriend offered to take everything on the spot. But the grumpy friend was not satisfied with the food. Like all girls, she loved to eat deliciously. However, her grumbling was interrupted by a guy with a burning gaze. "Try it first," he told them, confident in Jin's cooking, "and then they can say whether it's tasty or not." So, with Jin's help, he quickly began to cook a new batch of fried rice. under the watchful eyes of the owner and his niece. The guy asked for a plate a few minutes later, and Inso brought it right away. Just like last time, perfect cooking time, aroma, level of doneness, and beautiful presentation, Jin was perfect in every way. The owner told Inso to take the order, and the girl hurried. Meanwhile, the couple had just sat down, amused by the local workers' self-confidence. Usually, no one at the cafe cooked well. Perhaps the owner was simply desperate to hire such people, so just in case, they ordered a single serving of rice. And then the cutie. In-so approached them and stunned the guests with her appearance. They hadn't yet managed to log into the game and weren't expecting their order for the next half hour. The rice looked royally luxurious and tempted with its color and aroma. So good that the guest clarified that they'd ordered regular rice. In-seo nodded, her mouth watering at the aroma, and wished them bon appétit. Then the couple cautiously decided to give it a try. It was like a neutron storm that hits you during euphoria. The balance of spices, the warmth of the fried rice that literally melted in your mouth shook them to the core. And then they were hit with a diet flashback. Once upon a time, they both decided to get themselves in shape and subjected themselves to brutal training. But temptations followed them everywhere. So this food felt just like juicy chicken after a month of rice and vegetable diet, food of the gods. Their loud cries immediately attracted the attention of other gamers. Once the excitement started, others wanted to try it too. In an instant, the cafe was inundated with orders. 12 hungry gamers immediately wanted to eat, teased by the smell of rice, Inso was delighted by such a rush. The owner asked the guy anxiously if he could handle such a number of orders. The agent turned away and asked the puppeteer if he knew how to prepare large portions. But there was no doubt about Jin. He knew how to cook for a large number of soldiers because good food raised the fighting spirit of those who fought to the death. The agent nodded and gave Jin control of the body, ordering him to make 15 servings. After 3 hours of a continuous stream of guests, the owner was so happy that he wanted to know the name of the guy who laid the golden eggs. They made quite a bit of money selling food alone, so the owner was willing to pay in advance, but he was the only one left. And he asked his name again. Nakang In, the agent replied after thinking for a moment. Then the owner promised to clear out the warehouse so the guy could settle in there, and promised to buy groceries so he could cook. At that time, Inso lost herself in the divine taste of the agent's food. Jin was surprised that his host remembered his name, but it was more of a muscle memory. The guy himself didn't understand what he called him. Maybe they weren't real at all, but it would do for now. Afterwards, he continued cooking until the evening, and then sat down to rest in the corner. The issue of food and housing was resolved, but to get an official job, he needed to obtain documents, as he was essentially an illegal immigrant. To do this, Jin had to hack a couple of government websites. Luckily, he had hacking schemes and protocols in his memory that were ahead of their time. So Kang suggested hacking the bank and not bothering with part-time jobs. But the robot refused, citing a code of ethics built into its code that prohibited illegal manipulation. What about a fake identity? Kang asked, since his situation could be compared to a mission where he needed to infiltrate into foreign territory. The agent then handed over control again, and the robot began surfing the web, browsing government websites and searching for information. But then they found something and were very surprised by it. It turned out that a person with the name Na Kang In was already registered. Moreover, their fingerprints were a 100% match, which made this coincidence even more strange. Not only was his data fragmentary, but it also contradicted each other. The legend of an Earth Alliance agent who traveled to the past with an advanced neuroface did not fit with the fact that his personality already existed in this time. A quick check revealed that no alliance existed in 1924. Jin also complained about the lack of data for analysis. Kang then decided to dig deeper and study his personal history in this time, hoping that he did not have a twin brother or clone. But besides the fact that he never studied anywhere and served in the military in an administrative position, and is now unemployed, he has learned nothing. Jin alerted the agent to In-seo's approach, and the boy turned around. The girl noticed how quickly he was typing. This further piqued her curiosity and she asked if he was a programmer or not. But Kang quickly cut her off, replying that it was impolite to stare at someone else's monitor. The cutie wasn't upset at all because her uncle gave her a map and told her to take the guy with her to go shopping. They had done their shopping very quickly with the help of Jin, who knew the exact list, and were now strolling back with In-so chattering away. In addition to food, they also bought a frying pan, so the bag turned out to be heavy. But the guy handled it easily. He responded reluctantly and monosyllabically to his companion's surprised exclamations, but his new fan only admired the strong guy more and even touched his muscles because he could hold a heavy frying pan with rice for 15 servings with one hand. Jin quietly whispered to him not to be too happy, and the agent replied that it was not like that, but accidentally said it out loud, so Seo-in thought he was talking to her. The girl suggested going to a coffee shop since they finished so quickly, and Kang asked if she would pay the bill with the owner's card. At this time, someone was leaving the building and did not notice the girl, so they collided. The blow was powerful, sending Seo-in flying straight into Kang's chest. The man who had pushed her rudely blamed her for the collision. "If she doesn't need her eyes, they can tear them out," said two gangster-looking thugs. One was bald and ugly, with a scar on his head, and the second was shorter and also had gangster-like habits. Jin immediately warned Kang that the two were hostile, as could be expected from people with such faces, and he suggested switching to combat mode. But then, cutie. So In began to tearfully apologize, taking all the blame on herself. She started crying so loudly that the gangsters immediately softened. She didn't want to draw attention to herself. The bald man's partner explained that his partner was currently in a bad mood because of the loss, so they could go. Seo-in immediately thanked them. The big guys left and Kang looked after them. They didn't go to the cafe, but immediately returned to work, and Kang asked the girl how she was, but the cutie assured her that everything was fine. When they arrived, their uncle told them that they had a problem. The internet suddenly went out, but the technician he called wouldn't arrive for another hour. Kang, just in case, checked with Jin whether this commotion on the government website was caused by their manipulations, but the puppeteer assured him that it had gone unnoticed. Nevertheless, the agent decided to check the servers and ask the owner about them. Kang put on a smile and promised to take care of the problem. Jin found no evidence of surveillance, but he did detect an attempt to hack the network. It was strange because why would anyone hack into a regular computer club? The puppeteer reported that the hacker software and the antivirus entered into a battle and the security system cut off the connection. Perhaps someone used the computer club server for their test, the puppeteer suggested. Kang ordered Jin to find out where the virus was launched from and handed over control to avoid surveillance. The hacker used 7 other servers as stone bridges. 6 of them were located outside the border, and the last one was very close. Kang suggested that it could be a club nearby, and perhaps the hacker himself came to install the program there. He immediately began to suspect that 2 bandits might be involved in the matter. Many nervous, idle gamers had already begun to complain that they had lost their progress due to the disconnection. But Seo-in had to sheepishly apologize. One such impudent slacker openly took out his anger on a quiet girl. And yet he was a client, so Jin advised appeasing him with food. He offered a list of the most popular snacks, and Kang chose at random. The puppeteer praised his host for his good choice. The dessert was cheap. Seo-in was almost in tears. But Kang came to her rescue to get rid of the intrusive guest. Kang politely addressed the clinger, and holding out a treat, said that the servers had already stabilized and there would be no more shutdowns. The impudent fellow was still grumbling about the lost league and snatched up a glass of snacks. But when he boldly poured it all into his mouth, it was as if he was struck by an electric shock. For a while, Kang simply looked at the grumbler to see if he liked it or not. But the result was excellent. Now the university truant was again ready to take the Silver League and waste his life. Having taken more, he rushed off to dirty the keyboard with his greasy fingers. So-in herself reached out to try what Kang had prepared, surprised by the guest's reaction. The snack melted in her mouth, the salt and sugar, the burnt caramel made her heart beat faster. Completely delighted, she asked him how he managed to make such a delicious dish, but Kang modestly replied that he simply made it from what he had. He left the girl some more of these things and asked her to distribute them to the guests, and he himself said that he would go out to check something. Seo-in was completely overwhelmed by this guy's coolness and thought that if there were heroes in their time, Kang would definitely be among them. They need to destroy the enemy that attacked their base, Jin told him. Kang intended to do the same, so he ordered them to pave the way to the hacker. The puppeteer immediately filled the visual field with unusable signs and announced that there were no cameras or other means of detection along the route. So he chose a place where it would be difficult to find him, Kang realized, and decided to go inside the building. When he climbed the stairs, he heard some noise there. The words were hard to hear, and Jin sharpened his ears. Using advanced filters, he suppressed unnecessary noise and improved the sound quality. Inside, the bandits were threatening someone else. Apparently, they weren't hacking themselves, but forced an unemployed programmer to do it. The work wasn't progressing quickly, and the scoundrels were getting nervous. From their dialogue, it was clear that whoever carried out the entire scheme was acting under duress. And the agent decided to help this guy. Jin agreed with him. A few slaps did nothing to speed up the process, and the unfortunate programmer only began to whine louder. And then there was a polite knock on the door. In addition to the programmer, 3 more bandits were found in the room. When the doors opened, everyone stared in surprise at the person who burst in. It became clear at first glance who was the culprit and who was the victim. There was only one skinny, bespectacled man in the room. He thought that there was another madman in the gang of villains and was horrified. The criminals also looked at each other. Seeing that there was only one person entering, they calmed down. You never know who might have gotten caught. But they were also surprised because they thought the doors were closed. The bald giant looked menacingly at the man who had burst in and ordered that they deal with him. But his first accomplice received a dose of sedative right in the jaw. The sedative worked quickly. The impact happened so quickly that no one even realized what had happened. Just one guy peacefully lay down to sleep. The bespectacled man's name was An Sung Han, and he was a first-year student at Hankook University. Since childhood, he'd loved stories about all-powerful hackers and dreamed of becoming one. He studied hard, so people turned to Sung Han for advice, and that's how he became a white hat hacker. He needed a part-time job to study, and then he came across an ad offering to check a company for security, and the pay was simply excellent. The guy immediately agreed because for the first time he found a permanent job in his field. But it turned out that it was all a lie. The ad was fake, and those who posted it were scammers and bandits. Song Han immediately lost heart and despaired. He already thought that certain death awaited him. But then someone broke into this apartment where he was forced to work for food. His face was covered by a mask and a hooded cap. But he moved with determination and confidence like a true hero. For a few moments everyone froze, trying to assess what had happened. Only after the blow did Kang remember that his strength allowed him to break trees, and he hoped that the bandit was okay. At the moment, their goal is to solve the crime and destroy the criminal element, the ruthless Jin reminded. He'd already scanned the bandits and noticed dangerous weapons hidden in their pockets. The bandits began to protest menacingly and asked who he was. Then Kang asked to assess his condition, and the puppeteer assured him that the guy was in no danger because he had undergone special training, and besides, he would help him in the fight. The probability of success was full. Kang pointed his finger at the bandits and told them that he was just passing by and heard cries for help. And then some freaks appeared. Such disrespect immediately infuriated the scoundrels, and they began to grit their teeth. The bandit who was standing closer immediately rushed towards the strange guy, snatching a knife. Kang deliberately provoked his opponent to make it easier to defeat him. The opponent immediately received his dose of sedative with a kick to the head. His body flew up with such force that it hit the suspended ceiling and got stuck there. The last bandit froze in shock, not knowing what to do, cry, laugh, or call an ambulance. But he selflessly decided to repeat the fate of his predecessor and, drawing a knife, blindly rushed into the attack. Just to kiss the polo after Kang made a return movement with his leg. He miscalculated. But where? Thoughts flashed through his empty head, and the bandit lay down to think about his life and behavior. Kang himself admired his own kicks. Both the power and the technique were excellent. Jin reported that the whole point was that his strength was increased, but not with the help of harmful steroids, as Kang first thought. Meanwhile, the bespectacled man was trembling with fear as he looked at the madman who was talking to himself. Of course, Song Han assumed that this man could be a police officer talking to someone on a headset, or perhaps he was a government agent catching hackers. Even though he worked as a white hat hacker, he had his own dark deeds in the past, hacking websites and accounts of school bullies who bullied him, etc. Song Han started shouting and making excuses that he had done nothing wrong. And then Kang looked at him. He begged to be let go, because everything he'd done had been under duress, and he was a kind man who wouldn't hurt a fly. The boy was so tense, even though Kang hadn't intended to do anything to him anyway. Jin confirmed that by all indications the boy was telling the truth, and Kang was surprised that a combat neuroface could even do that. His neural networks allowed him to analyze micro-expressions, voice timbre, and gestures, so he easily realized that the frightened hacker was telling the truth. Kang continued to talk to Jin out loud, so the bespectacled man couldn't understand what was happening and only became more frightened. And then he turned to him sharply and asked why he was there. Then, Song Han told everything as it happened and how he was deceived by scammers. They are the real villains, he said. Even after he completed the task, they continued to force him. Initially, these scoundrels wanted to manipulate stock prices, the guy said, and this surprised Kang. The sleeping hooligans looked too stupid to do such a thing. The hacker's goal was to create a program that could write comments on stock market websites, and then the criminals installed this software in a nearby computer club. Now it all came together, Kang thought. That's where he met those big guys. The agent assumed that these scoundrels were someone's pawns, and that there was definitely someone behind them. At least he knew that he wasn't the scammer's target, which meant he could relax. But he couldn't just let the villains go either. And so, he told Song Han to call the police and say that he was kidnapped and everything else. The guy was surprised because he thought that his savior was a policeman, but now he was afraid that he could also be punished. For some reason, he took Kang for the elder and called him uncle, although he did not see his face under the mask. Kang introduced himself as an ordinary passerby who heard his cries for help and saved him, and he immediately said goodbye to this one. But Song Han delayed him and hesitated for a long time before asking. He wanted to hit the giants who were sleeping peacefully a couple of times, to which Kang magnanimously stated that his permission was not required. Besides, the poor guy definitely won't wake up anytime soon, and even if he does wake up, he won't be able to do anything, the agent assured the hacker. And he beamed with joy. Like all beginners, he swung wide, thinking that this would hit harder. However, at the moment when his blow almost reached its target, the bald giant suddenly jerked and stood up. It happened so unexpectedly that both guys shuddered in horror. Later, the police arrived at this house. It's been a long time since law enforcement officials have seen anyone paint criminals like this. But at least they didn't resist arrest. They were breathing fine, and in the meantime, the detectives took a statement from the bespectacled boy who called them. He laid out the criminal's entire scheme to them and said that he was their victim because he had received death threats. However, the law enforcement officers still had questions about how such a skinny guy could paint the criminals so beautifully. And then Song Han told about his savior. The senior detective immediately realized with an experienced eye that someone else was involved in the case. He ordered his assistants to interrogate the criminals as soon as they woke up in the hospital. Perhaps, under the influence of painkillers, they would say more than they wanted. The question remained as to who suddenly took up re-education. Apart from a couple of fractures, neither of their lives were in danger, and they were the first to draw their knives, so it could be considered self-defense. But the detective decided to check the surveillance footage and find this guy, even though they weren't going to arrest him. They didn't want to let him go unnoticed either. Meanwhile, Jin led Kang along a route that would keep them out of the sight of security cameras. Then, from a sharp swing, the bald giant jumped up, and Kang got scared. After all, some people were gifted with innate reflexes, he noted. When he had walked far enough, he took off the annoying mask and asked if Jin had a call function, but there was none. This means Kang will have to buy himself a phone. Fortunately, he can pay in installments. 3 days have passed since the showdown with the hacker and the bandits. And Kang went to the address he saw on the government website to learn more about the person with the same name and fingerprints. But at the indicated point, there was only a wasteland, about which the locals whispered that everything there had been destroyed by fire. Unfortunately, this thread led him nowhere, and Kang still didn't know who he was. Whether he was from the future or just maintaining contact with the future, he ended up returning empty-handed. The computer club where he joined was doing well, and their income grew. Thanks to bloggers who visited them and appreciated the delicious food, they experienced an influx of guests and new customers. A special menu was served only during Kang's shift. Despite this, there were always a lot of people in the club, regardless of whether he was on shift or not. There were those who came to eat, but in the end they just sat down to play. Cha Dong-sok, the owner of an internet cafe, decided to hire another person since they had more work. He called Kang and introduced the new employee. The agent was surprised when he saw his face. In front of him was the same hacker they had accidentally saved. He looked better and was beaming with enthusiasm. Don Seok read the resume. The guy had studied computer science, so he knew how to use a computer well, and he promised to help if any problems arose. That's why he was hired immediately, and Song Han bowed politely. In fact, he came here out of guilt, because it was because of him that this computer club suffered losses. He had not originally intended to take such a job, but now he considered it his duty. The owner then introduced the hacker to Kang and introduced him as the chef who made the club famous. The two guys stared at each other, and the agent waited to see if they recognized him or not. Suddenly, the hacker exclaimed. But he simply thought that the strong guy in front of him was older than him, and he wanted to clarify this point so that he knew how to address him. Then Kang thought that he was not recognized, and the bespectacled man extended his hand to shake his. But Jin warned him that working with this bespectacled guy could lead to their identity being revealed, and it would be better not to take this guy. But Kang couldn't refuse the boy who was burning with enthusiasm, and besides, now they weren't calling him uncle. Afterwards, the agent went shopping, using the virtual list Jean had compiled. In everyday life, the neuroface was incredibly useful. He carefully monitored Kang's spending and kept receipts, so he suspected the neural network of excessive commercialism. But Jin considered it financial literacy. He then gave a long lecture on rational, healthy, and beneficial nutrition, but Kang corrected him that sometimes you can just enjoy food and not bother your head. And then, while Kang was just walking down the street, Jin told him that a fire had started nearby. At first, nothing seemed strange to Kang on the street. It looked like Jin was mistaken, or was deliberately distracting the agent from their argument due to a lack of arguments. And at that very second, the building across the street burst into flames like a match, and an explosion and the sound of broken glass were heard. Kang froze in surprise. Exactly what the puppeteer's sensors had warned him about had happened. The street was filled with the screams of panicked people who ran away, not knowing what to do. The fire quickly spread throughout the building. An artificial intelligence combat support system was implanted into his body. The neuroface penetrated his eyes, brain, and spine. Every muscle he had was enhanced to the limit with super reflex implants. He had to suppress a fire of this magnitude in one go, Kang decided, shouting the code words, "Fire extinguishing beam," and striking a funny anime pose. However, nothing happened. He only caught the surprised look of a passing schoolboy. Even Jin doubted his host's sanity and ran a diagnostic just in case. Kang was so used to his cheats that he thought he wouldn't accidentally fire a freezing superpower at his body. The only thing they could do now was call the fire department, but without a phone, Kang was useless. And then, through the screams and noise, a cry for help reached him. A girl is stuck on the roof, and Jean estimates that emergency services will not arrive for at least 4 minutes. There is a high probability that she will suffocate and die faster than they arrive, the puppeteer concluded. Kang put the mask on his face, like the guy who shot the web and told the settler to plot a route to the target. It was impossible to climb up inside. There was a strong fire in his path, so the neuroface illuminated the path along the facade of the building, taking into account his physical characteristics. This route also avoided areas where the agent could inhale acrid smoke. With deft movements, Kang climbed straight to the 3rd floor, attracting the attention of onlookers below. Along the way, Jin checked for other victims but heard nothing. Kang leaped up and grabbed the ledge of the facade, just like the assassin from Florence. Passers-by watched with bated breath as he climbed onto the roof like a mountain climber. And then Jean discovered the danger of an explosion in the immediate vicinity. The windows next to Kang were shaking, and then he was thrown aside by the flames from within. Only with the help of his super reflexes and strong muscles that seemed to grip the cornice in a vice was the agent able to stay on the wall. After making a few more jumps, he almost reached his goal. A black-haired girl cowered in fear in the corner. She looked scared and was crying. And then a hero appeared who extended his hand to her. Then the desperate girl began to sob even louder, rejoicing that they had come for her. The fire was growing stronger with each passing minute and was threatening to spread to the roof. The chances of survival had decreased, Jin told him. "So they're going to die here?" Kang asked him out loud as usual, which startled the girl again. But the boy told her to shut up and not disturb her thoughts. He asked Jean to calculate the jump from the roof to the neighboring house. However, he warned that they had too many witnesses. His super skills would definitely arouse suspicion, and this would jeopardize the entire infiltration mission. But then a clothesline caught his eye. It would have been possible to go down with her help, but the fragile girl immediately declared that she wouldn't be able to do it. Besides, the fire had already reached the walls, so this method of getting down would not work. Then Kang decided to throw the rope to another building and walk along it like a circus tightrope walker. Again, the guy said this out loud, which frightened the girl. Ignoring her indignant squeals, Kang asked Jin to help him with his balance once he was on the rope. He then took a carabiner and a rope and asked Jean to throw him onto the roof. However, the puppeteer was unable to perform the attack, and Kang himself hooked the carbine onto a loop sticking out of the roof. The machine could cook and cut onions, but it couldn't throw a carbine. Sometimes its protocols worked strangely, and the agent thought confusedly. There was nothing left to do, so he threw the rope himself and asked Jean to adjust the aiming. It worked out well, and the carabiner snapped right onto the stairs of another house. The plan worked, and Kang was able to stretch the rope so that it could be walked on. After that, he quickly grabbed the girl who was fluttering in his arms, shouting that he wanted to kill her along with himself. The onlookers below froze in amazement at this circus trick. Amidst the girl's loud screams and under Jin's control, Kang stood on the rope and slowly moved towards another building. However, It then became clear that the rope would not last long, and before they reached the other roof, it will simply burn out from the heat. Before Kang could take a step, the cable snapped and they fell like stones to the ground. To save the girl, he threw her onto the roof of the house. Although not in the most pleasant way, the girl made a soft landing, and Kang flew to the ground. And he began to quickly figure out what to do, and the square of speed that pressed mercilessly on him gave him motivation. Luckily, he managed to grab a piece of the rope and hang on to it, and the steel grip allowed him not to lose his fingers from friction. Kang ran along the wall holding a rope in his hand. By some miracle, he managed to survive and even quickly climbed to the top, which again attracted astonished glances. Using inertia, he jumped onto the roof, and he landed like a superhero, although this whole story made the guy nervous. Then he asked the girl how she was. She screamed as if she had seen a ghost, but Kang convinced her that he was still alive. Even on this roof, the fire could quickly reach them, so he ordered her to come down. The rescued woman asked him how he survived. Was he really a superhero? And the boy modestly agreed. However, the rescued woman noticed that he was communicating with her informally. But Kang did this instinctively, because she looked younger than him. At this point, their conversation ended, and Kang scolded Jin for creating a foolproof plan. But the robot apologized for not taking into account that the building's walls were made of flammable materials. But then the rescued woman herself turned to him, and she easily recognized him as the cook from the computer club despite the mask on his face, which shocked the guy. Then the firefighters arrived and got to work. Police officers also conducted an investigation at the scene of the fire and watched footage from passers-by. The guy in the video definitely had to be either a tightrope walker or a mountain climber. They had only one clue: the package that the boy threw away when he saw the fire. To climb the house and save the girl, he needed his hands free. So most likely this package belonged to the hero, the detective concluded. At least that's what his intuition told him. They then examined the contents of the bag, several sauces and wet receipts. However, the store's name was still on them, and the assistant offered to inspect the cameras and find the guy. But the senior detective refused, since the hero had not committed anything illegal. But then his thoughts were interrupted by the captain's call, and the detective reluctantly picked up the phone, grumbling without any subordination. But the chief was angry, because what happened was not a simple short circuit, the detective assumed. But that wasn't the point. A dead person was found on the third floor. The detective swore angrily, hoping there were no casualties. Now he simply had to find the tightrope walker and interrogate him. A couple of hours later, the rescued girl emerged from the bathhouse, which she had asked the disgruntled hero to pay for, as if her conscience had been burned in a fire. She immediately assumed an innocent expression, saying that her house had burned down, and besides, she had no parents and no idea where to sleep. But Kang countered that he too lived alone. The girl told him that she had entered university, taken out a loan for her studies, and found a job to survive. But now she was in utter despair, although Kang indifferently noted that she could still work. And where is the little girl with blue eyes? Asked him. Then she remembered that he worked in a computer club and asked if they needed workers and then asked him to take him with him. And when Kang ignored her and started to walk away, she clung to him with all her might. The agent replied that all questions should be directed to the owner, who was simply an employee. The annoying girl asked me to put in a good word for her. Kang refused and asked casually how she recognized him. And then the little girl replied that she often goes to the club. After all, she is a miracle streamer. Without a home or a computer, she had to connect directly from the club. She's the beauty and the good player, Kang noted dryly. However, he quickly discovered she's a bad player and only has 30 subscribers. At that moment, he felt sorry for the lazy woman and he took her with him. When Kang returned from the store, he was met by a worried Seo-in who asked why he was so late. And then she saw a strange girl who introduced herself as Yunarin and said she would be working here. Not yet, Kang corrected her. Then he told the story about the fire and said that he was so distracted by it that he lost the bag. But Soen only laughed at this, despite the fact that the guy spent money and lost the sauces. Jin also decided to perk up and remembered that most likely the agent was filmed by many people who were downstairs, so he needed to quickly go online and look for information about himself. Videos from the scene have already gone viral online, and there have been many of them. Kang suggested simply deleting them from the network, but even the advanced Jin didn't possess such hacker magic. His skills were more specialized in warfare and countering hacking by other hackers. But without them, he couldn't even demonstrate his skills. Meanwhile, one detective decided to go into a computer club. Using eyewitness accounts and cameras, he quickly found the place where the tightrope walker was working. After his work shift, Kang returned to the utility room. He sat at the computer for a long time and searched the internet, but found nothing, so he lay down on the sofa. He even checked various rumors about time travelers, but if there were any, they had to hide themselves just like him. Kang definitely came from the future, as his implants and enhanced body could not be created with current technology. And then he checked yesterday's incident and was horrified to discover that a man had died in the fire. And at first Kang thought that they had not noticed him. But Jin said that this was not so. The deceased was found in the room they passed by yesterday. On the other hand, the implant did not have special vision and used the host's eyes, so it could miss something. Jin was sure that he did not sense anyone's presence. But what if the man was already dead? It suddenly occurred to Kang. Then the fire itself might not have been entirely accidental, and the puppeteer agreed that the likelihood of this was high. Voices were heard from outside. A man came and said that he was from the police. He was looking for the owner of the card that was used to pay in the store yesterday. The detective also had physical evidence with him, in the form of a bag of sauces. Co-In immediately recognized the shopping list in the bag and quickly handed it over to Kang. Here the Alliance agent himself left his hideout, and So-In told him that the detective had brought him the lost package. But he was deeply disturbed by the fact that, according to the girl, the guy had simply been distracted by the fire and lost the package. The girl, however, thought that the police were now also returning lost items. Kang thanked the detective politely. He handed him a business card and asked him to give testimony about the fire incident if the guy remembered anything. With that, they said goodbye. Seo-In smiling sweetly at the detective. To find the killer, Kang thought, he needed the help of a detective and decided that he needed to meet with him. Now that he had an ID, Kang could confidently deal with the police, Jin agreed. Meanwhile, Seo-In suggested they spend time together and get to know each other better. Jin told Kang that his connections with the police would help him in the future, and the boy then agreed, out loud as usual. So-In, thinking he'd agreed with her, was delighted. The girl immediately began jumping for joy that they would be working together today, but Kang refused, citing that he had things to do. He left like that, leaving the cutie completely bewildered. But the silly girl liked this unpredictability. At the police station, Kang met a detective who had just brought him a package. The detective thought that they had come to thank him for such a trifle, but the guy hadn't brought anything with him, and for a second there was an awkward silence. The detective felt ashamed of his haste and asked why the guy was there, to which Kang stated that yesterday's fire may have been part of the murder. The detective nodded. They had indeed found a body, and Kang repeated that he considered it a murder, to which the detective responded skeptically, anyone could make any assumptions, but there needed to be compelling evidence. And then Kang reported that yesterday he did not find any living people inside when he was climbing up the building. The detective nodded. And only a second later the meaning of what was said reached him and he screamed. The tightrope walker shouted and pointed his finger at the guy, and Kang modestly confirmed his guess. Why didn't he ask anything right away, the detective wondered, to which the agent reasonably noted that he hadn't been asked anything. But now the detective was more concerned with how the guy managed to climb the building and jump on a rope like the Florentine assassin. But Kang cut off this stream of curiosity and asked the policeman to return to the matter, who sheepishly took out a notebook to write down the testimony. During the fire, no cries for help were heard from inside. The person was either already dead or unconscious. Kang assumed that the arson was set to cover up the traces of the crime, since yesterday he checked every floor when he went up. Another officer came up and asked Detective Pak if they had received the results of the examination, but they had not yet received them since the autopsy took more time. Another employee reported that the fire could have started due to a short circuit. Unfortunately, there were no useful cameras in the area. While the police argued about the best course of action, Kang began to think. Then he asked Jin if he by any chance remembered the faces of the people they saw yesterday. The puppeteer remembered and even recreated the recording before and during the fire. He kept it because he considered it important. Kang told detectives he saw 3 people come out of the other side of the building just before the fire. The first one came out of the alley and was talking to someone on the phone, a bracelet on his left wrist, and a checkered shirt missing 2 buttons. Under the shirt was a white t-shirt. The phone was in a gray case. Kang continued to sketch out details, which surprised the detective. Then he described the second and third in the same way. It was not difficult because he was looking straight at them. The detective asked for help in drawing up a composite sketch. The person responsible for the photo fit was not there at the moment and we had to wait, so Kang said that he would draw everything himself. He modestly agreed that he could draw a little. Of course, Kang wasn't an artist. He knew that despite the loss of his memories, but Jin certainly knew how to draw. The agent asked the puppeteer to bring the suspects' faces into view. Then, under the strange gazes of the police, he began to converse with Jin, whom no one heard, and to draw. There was no point in speaking out loud. They could communicate mentally, but the agent kept forgetting. Now the faces of the suspects were projected onto a piece of paper, and all that remained was to trace them. Kang finished, and the police looked at the sheet of paper. The image was just a little lacking in pressure and shadows. Realizing what a mistake he had made, the agent immediately crumpled the piece of paper out of shame and embarrassment. He was just stretching his arms. He apologized to the detectives and asked them to wait a bit. "Why doesn't he draw?" Kang Jin asked, and the puppeteer asked for control first. The police were about to call the expert and hurry him up. They were disappointed, because the guy spoke of his skills with great confidence. But then they looked in his direction again. Surprise was frozen on their faces. Kang simply moved the pen from side to side, and gradually an image appeared on the sheet of paper, as if it had been printed by a printer. Few artists were capable of such speed and precision, so Jin's mastery caused a stir. And then he showed them perfect graphic portraits of the three suspects. The senior detective immediately ordered that this description be sent out to everyone and that these people be found. The next day, Jin once again delighted people with his wonderful cooking. The mushroom soup was a hit with everyone, so the kids continued to praise Kang even with their mouths full. Seo-in remembered hearing on the news that the building where Yuna lived was deliberately set on fire, but the suspect had already been found and detained. They found melange in his pockets, the girl added. Kang was surprised by the speed of the police. Only yesterday he gave them the description, and all this thanks to Jin's skills. Then, Detective Pak himself called him and thanked him for his help in catching him. Two of the three suspects simply lived in the area, but no one knew the third, and it turned out that he was a friend of the deceased. Datura was found in a man's wallet. Perhaps the killer came to borrow money, but without receiving it, he started a quarrel and ended up killing his friend. The most disgusting thing is that the killer was caught in the place where he was buying dope, and a famous actor was caught among this crowd, so the case has now received wide publicity in the media. Kang had heard nothing about the actor and silently listened to the grumbling of the detective, who was left without leave due to workload. Of course, the sketches Kang drew for them greatly sped up the process, and the detective asked if they could publish the drawings. Jin warned that doing so might draw attention to them. Kang agreed, but asked that his authorship not be revealed, while the company employees fell silent and listened attentively. The agent modestly noted that he did what he had to and did not want fame. After the call ended, three curious children stared at the agent. Kang told them that he had drawn something, and the three of them laughed, thinking that the drawing was terrible since the guy did not want to reveal his authorship. But then a noise came from the hall and everyone turned around. Some idiot spilled soup on himself, and an argument ensued between him and his friend about who was to blame. Yuna volunteered to clean up and everyone got to work. She worked diligently, hoping to receive encouragement from the owner for this, and she was in such a hurry that she didn't notice the person in front of her, so she collided with him and fell. Yuna began to apologize, and the man who fell with her complained of pain in his wrist. It looked like a normal bruise, but the guy started whining and complaining that he had a fracture. Yuna immediately panicked and was about to call all the services at once, but Kang doubted that there was a fracture. Jin assessed the condition visually and apparently noticed swelling and puffiness, so he concluded that there might be a crack, and to confirm this, he needed to palpate the bruise. Kang asked for his hand to look at, and the fat man was surprised to hear such a request from the cook. Jin checked the condition of the muscles and ligaments. The bone was undamaged, but the wrist was sprained. Kang told the boy the bone was fine. He was still complaining of pain, and he promised to help him with that. After some minor manipulations, the swelling decreased a little and the pain partially went away. Seo-in and Han Song were surprised that their cook was capable of such a thing. The girl even wanted to damage something. The agent warned the victim that it would be better not to put any weight on his arm for another day, or it would get worse. However, it turned out that he works as a cook in a van and has to cook in another area tomorrow. He was invited to work part-time by a film company that was doing urgent filming, and then Yuna offered her help. Unfortunately, Yuna could only cook instant noodles, while the victim needed a cook. And then he looked at Kang with eyes full of pity and hope. Jin clarified that this is the look of a desperate man who will not accept refusal. However, Kang refused, but the cook promised to pay 300,000 won for one day. And the secret agent from the future immediately changed his mind, hitting the chubby guy on the healthy arm. They immediately agreed on the menu, and the fat man was very happy about it. He liked Kang's cooking. He himself came to this club after hearing that the food here was delicious, and after trying it, He was shocked. Now he was sure that he could learn something from the guy if they cooked together. For the agent, such a trip was also useful. He had already learned everything about the place where he was, and now he had to investigate other areas. The next morning, they set off for their destination. The fat man praised the guy for his driving skills, and Kang modestly noted that he simply had experience. Of course, the food truck was driven by Jin. The chef was excited, hoping to surprise the actors and film crew with good food. He also said that the actor who was caught using dope at the party took part in the filming. There was only a week left until the premiere, and it was unclear whether the film would be released. The chef stated that this could not have happened, which is why urgent reshoots of the film took place. It's good that work has become available for the mobile chef, but the studio is a mess because all the scenes with that guy had to be reshot. The premiere date could not be rescheduled, as the film was scheduled to be shown in many cinemas, and if it was cancelled, the company would suffer losses. The director's name was Song Ten-min, said the chef, who liked his work and was confident that this professional could handle everything. Ten-min himself sat tiredly in his chair and was nervous. He didn't like anything he saw. The assistant suggested doing another take, but they didn't have time for it. The director lamented that he would have to agree to this horror, and all because of one fool. And then he exploded like a stick of dynamite and promised to rip the bastard's head off if he saw him. The assistant suggested that we first have a snack and rest, since everyone was nervous and tired. But in the end, he only became a lightning rod for Ten-Ming, who began yelling at him, saying that he would not be able to eat now. However, as soon as he tasted the food of the silicon gods, he immediately calmed his anger. This food was created and optimized to boost morale on the battlefield, a place where people experience far more stress, so it worked. It was as if someone had added melange to it, said the assistant, and the director angrily shouted at them not to remind him about the spices. They looked at the young guy who was cooking today instead of the chef, and were amazed that at such a young age he was such an excellent cook. The assistant tried to cheer Tenmin up, saying that the view here was gorgeous, the weather was great, and he needed to relax and think positively. They are lucky that other actors are not involved in this dirty business. But then actress Shin Ha ran out onto the set and reported new problems. One of the stunt doubles had sprained his ankle and couldn't continue. They immediately hurried to the victim, throwing down their sticks. And they saw the dubbing actor sitting on the ground with a dislocation. He clearly needed first aid, but they were in the mountains and didn't know how quickly an ambulance would arrive, or if it would arrive at all. Now the director, who had regained his spirit, finally fell into despair, not knowing what to do. Why are they so unlucky? It's as if they were jinxed, the boss said sympathetically, and he asked Kang if he could help the guy, because he had helped him with his wrist. Jean advised immobilizing the joint. This should help. Kang immediately headed towards the guy. Approaching the actor, he said with a serious expression that he would examine his injury. He also told the director that although he would provide assistance, the victim still needed to be taken to the hospital. Turning to the girl next to him, he asked her if she was a staff member, and she was taken aback by the stupidity and absurdity of the question. He asked her to get some compression bandages from the first aid kit, and Shinha didn't know what to answer. She would have continued staring at him if the director hadn't asked her to quickly bring the bandages. On the way, she came to her senses a little and began to figure out what had thrown her off track so much. Whether it was intentional or accidental, some cook had just mistaken her for a servant. Of course, she was a supporting actress, but even so, it deeply affected her. Shinha quickly returned and brought bandages. Kang thanked him and began to provide first aid. Strange crunching sounds came from his direction, so the impressionable actress turned around. Jean diagnosed a severe sprain, but it was not a dislocation. Kang carefully applied the bandages as per the puppeteer's instructions. At first, the victim felt pain, but now he felt better, as if the bone had returned to its place, and he could move freely. Kang warned that heavy loads on the joint are contraindicated. This help is temporary, and until complete recovery, it is impossible to move, he said, which again upset the director. His assistant consoled Ten-Min, saying they would find another understudy. But where could they find another guy with the same build, and when would he have time to come to these mountains? And they still need to learn the movements. This day is already lost, which means they won't make it to the premiere, and then everything is lost, the director started shouting. Then the assistant suggested that Yu Chang himself, who played the main character, perform all the stunts. And the actor who approached assured them that he could handle it. But Ten-Ming understood very well that Yu Chang was too clumsy, and that a single sprained ankle would not be enough. They could not take such a risk. It was also possible to choose someone similar and put a mask on them. But there was no queue of people willing to do so. Ten Ming fell to his knees and began to pray to the Lord, asking why he was being sent such trials. He was ready to pay double, even triple the price, just so they would send him a skilled understudy. And then Kang confidently declared that he was sent by God himself to save him. He immediately added that he was joking but was still ready to help, seeing their stunned looks. An offended Shinha immediately screamed that this could not be allowed because a man from the street was not even a member of their team. They needed an actor. But the director didn't listen to her, but carefully examined the guy, comparing his figure with Yu Chang. They were the same height and almost the same width in the shoulders. The young chef even looked stronger. He grabbed his hands and asked if he could move well. Then he asked them to help him. The crew was desperately short on time. They'd change his clothes and apply makeup and edit out his awkward movements as long as he agreed. Kang was willing to help for triple pay. After some time, they brought the agent to the set. Yu-chan played the role of the main character, who saves the supporting character played by Shin-ha in this episode. The scoundrel who set everyone up played the role of the villain, and now they reshot all the scenes in which he starred. While the equipment was being installed, Ten Min asked Kang to rehearse and ask others if anything was unclear. Kang quickly glanced at the script and noticed that many of the fight scenes looked unnatural. But these were simple movements, and there was no time to learn anything else. Jin's ears creaked with negation. "That's not how filming works," he said, because he had a protocol for filming motivational films for new recruits. Kang then suggested that the three stuntmen improvise and actually attack him. They should attack as if he were a real enemy, and that way everything will look much more natural. The guys didn't immediately agree. It was a big risk, and actress Shin Ha also looked skeptically at the young guy, who, in her opinion, was just showing off. "What could this braggart possibly know about filming?" the actress snorted. She was still offended because she was not recognized. When the makeup was ready, Kang came to the director. He suggested that he film the whole thing in one take, which greatly surprised Ten Min. Shooting without preparation would save them precious time. Of course, the director himself was happy to do it. But was it even possible? Kang asked to trust him and promised to do a great job because he was well paid and his voice sounded with unshakable confidence. He told Ten Min not to stop and to film until the end, and then went to the beginning of the scene. The director sat there for a long time, gulping air like a fish, and then he frowned. However, his many years of experience whispered to him that he could believe this guy, because even to lie so convincingly required talent. The camera rolled, shouts began to ring out, and Shin Ha immediately jumped into the game of being a damsel in distress. She asked to be saved as three bandits were rapidly approaching. The guys very naturally played the role of notorious scoundrels who wanted to catch and abuse a fragile girl. But then there was a knock on the door, so loud that it almost flew off its hinges. Kang ignored the stairs in the warehouse and immediately jumped down right in front of the bandits. The actors were actually scared. Before filming, this guy told them to attack him with full force, and after the very first jump they were convinced that he could do something. An actor in leopard print shorts, the kind usually worn by villains, attacked first. Jin calculated the enemy's trajectory of movements, so Kang clearly saw where the picturesque wide swing would end. He performed a left volt and dodged it easily. He also easily dodged the next blow with a volt to the right. The Alliance agent's body reacted even before Jin's prompts. Super reflexes kicked in. Kang leaped and dodged the sweep. Jin also directed his movements for capture based on the camera's angle. So the agent immediately turned to face her so that his actions would be clearly visible. Kang completed the move, and the stuntman was thrown into the air by the powerful throw. The agent then managed to hit him several times in the air, and it all looked like a monstrous beating. The stuntmen froze in horror as they were actually being beaten. They screamed very naturally, as a villain should scream in front of a master with overwhelming force. The camera captured a powerful blow from above. None of this was in the script, and the last actor was a little confused. But he felt that the director was not stopping filming, and then he desperately rushed at Kang from behind. But he dodged again with a devilish volt back so that his sculpted abdominal muscles were caught in the camera. And then, on the return move, he hit the stuntman with his head, after which he finished defeating the enemy using a stick, as if he were playing baseball. Everyone who saw this was frozen with horror. This guy is definitely crazy, they realized when the battle was over. Kang moved towards Shin Han, who was even more afraid of him than the fake hooligans. The agent said his line, he came to save her. Shin Ha hesitated and stuttered her answer, but quite naturally. "He's not going to beat her up either," the girl asked, completely forgetting about the script. And then the director shouted loudly, "Cut!" There was a lot of shouting. They were worried about whether their stuntmen were okay, because they weren't supposed to hit for real. The director realized that Kang had simply decided to end his career, and he scolded himself for agreeing to this. But then the stuntmen jumped up as if nothing had happened. They ran up to Kang and asked how he did it, because the guys didn't even feel his blows. It was the first time someone had worked at such a level. He moved so naturally that they almost wet themselves from fear. Once again, Ten Min was shocked, as he thought the stuntmen would have to be left in the mountains. The assistant started yelling at the stunt double for beating up the stuntmen and throwing them around like bowling pins. He pointed at them with his finger, and only then noticed that they were completely fine. No one else understood what kind of magic Kang had used to pull off such a thing. It was as if they were being hit with something soft, the fist moving quickly but ultimately just pushing them to the side, explained one of the actors. But how? Asked the assistant. And Kang explained that it was like falling and sliding like on skis. It sounded like complete nonsense because one of the actors was kneed in the stomach and sent flying. But the guy smiled and explained that they simply gave him a lift and also supported him when he was falling down. However, through the camera it looked as if they had been beaten, so the cameraman could not believe that the actors were not in pain. But then the director himself stopped him. He was as happy as anyone else, realizing that no one was hurt. He stated that he never doubted the guy and knew everything from the very beginning, which is why he did not stop filming. Ten Min told everyone to get ready for the next scenes, and he himself decided to check the footage. Yu Chang praised the cameraman for the good and realistic shots, but he modestly noted that this was not his merit. The guy himself moved with the location of the cameras in mind, and very precisely. All the cameraman had to do was watch him and hold the camera, even from other angles. It looked as if the actor knew everyone's location and took it into account. At this point, Kang's work was finished, and the director thanked him for a job well done. Thanks to this guy, their film will be on par with Hollywood. After that, Ten Ming went to his chair. Another scene with Yu Chang awaited them. Yu Chan praised Kang for his acting talent and asked where he worked, and the guy modestly replied that he worked in a van. He couldn't say that he was a super-secret agent from the future. Shin Ha, meanwhile, was indignant that so much attention was being paid to the braggart. She thought that 3 stuntmen were beaten, but they pretended that everything was fine so as not to have to film a new take. The girl thought that their eyes were full of tears. If the script had included her being beaten, this madman would have treated her like a punching bag. And when Kang returned her gaze, Shin Ha flinched. The very sight of this strange guy with icy eyes frightened her. For a second she became even more frightened, thinking that he could read her thoughts. But the agent looked away. Jin said that a strange sound was coming from the counter by the wall. Kang scanned the entire room, and Jin was able to discover the reason. It was hidden in the suspension bridge above. In a few seconds, the structure will fall from the ceiling, and the debris will crush people, the puppeteer said. He had a few seconds to grab Yu Chan by the collar of his green Hawaiian shirt, and without explaining anything, throw it away. Shin Ha tore her hair out. She thought that the strange guy had gone completely crazy and was about to attack her. She screamed at him not to kill her, as Kang grabbed the girl by the waist and also ran away, taking the pipe with him. Hanging shields rained down on them, and Kang used a piece of pipe to knock them aside. A terrible crash of metal was heard in the studio. The suspension bridge completely collapsed, but with the help of his reflexes, Kang knocked back all the debris. All this time, Shin Ha did not stop screaming that she was being killed. Her screams and squeals greatly irritated Kang, but Jin did not lose concentration, beating off the trash. Passing all dangers, he moved forward. But then Jin gave another warning. A huge structure was falling on him. There was a deafening blow, and everything was covered in dust. 10 men screamed in horror and started calling for Shin Ha. The loss of another actor was fatal for him. As soon as everything calmed down, Shin Ha started screaming again that she was being killed, but Kang stopped her. "She's still alive," he told the girl and asked if she was very scared. But instead of gratitude for saving him, she rewarded him with reproach, because he threw Yu Chang without reason, and then he could send her flying too. Kang calmly explained to the restless woman that the platform had fallen and he had just saved them. And only then did Shin Ha realize what had happened. She pressed her hands to her mouth in horror, and the agent explained to her that the structures above were unreliable. If it weren't for this guy, she and Yu Chan would have been left under the rubble, the actress realized. She finally understood him. The agent answered the girl and asked her to get off him. The embarrassed actress immediately jumped away. Yu Chang also thought that he had somehow angered the guy, and he had thrown him away, so now he apologized and thanked him for saving him. Although he was thrown hard, he was completely fine. And then the director ran up to them. He was very worried about them and hoped that no one was hurt. Yu Chang was fine, and Ten Ming looked at his actress. But the girl did not take her eyes off the cold eyes of her savior. Her heart started beating faster and a blush appeared on her cheeks. It looks like this guy is not so bad, she thought. The director himself breathed a sigh of relief. He almost had a heart attack, and his hair definitely became more gray. If these debris had hit the actors, they could have died altogether. Ten Ming realized that the death of the actors on the film set, which was hastily assembled due to urgency, would have ended his career. This boy is a real hero in the flesh, he thought, and prayed to the heavens with gratitude. The assistant asked Ten Min if they should fix everything and resume filming, but the director yelled at him, saying that it was the rush that had caused everything to collapse. But then the cameraman called them and said that he had managed to film the moment the suspended structures collapsed. He didn't turn off the camera to film behind the scenes, so they were doubly lucky, said the cameraman, and turned on the recording. Then they saw incredible footage that looked like it was created with computer graphics. Ten Min got goosebumps from what he managed to capture. Now they are not inferior to Hollywood, and yet it all happened spontaneously. With such footage, he was in for a sensation. He was already drooling over his future success. But then his assistant approached him. Even though everything turned out very cool, these shots are still a recording of a real incident, not a staged one. What would happen if people found out that this wasn't planned in the script? Asked the assistant. And Ten Min realized that a wave of indignation would await them in this case. But he was still looking for loopholes to cheat, because no one was hurt and everything could be resolved through a law firm. But what if Kang doesn't want these materials to be used? The assistant asked. And Ten Min fell silent again. Before the guy left the set, the director caught up with him and asked him to wait. He started from the beginning, thanking Kang for saving his filming and Shin Ha. Saving civilians is an agent's job, Jin methodically repeated in the boy's head. Just did what had to be done, Kang replied before Jin got carried away and filled his head with spam. The words of a true hero, Ten Min echoed, and said that his heroism was captured on camera, so he came to ask permission to use it. He even promised to use the guy's name in the credits. But Jin methodically reminded him that if the agent's face became known, it would complicate his task of infiltration. The director promised to pay. His face was covered by a mask so there wouldn't be any problems, Jin noted, just as methodically, and they shook hands. Meanwhile, the manager was fussing around Shin Ha, but the girl was deep in thought. She didn't even look at her manager. Her gaze was diligently drilling into the broad back of this strange guy who saved her, and she saw a cut on his shirt. She approached Kang and asked if he was hurt, but he indifferently replied that everything was fine. Now that she had calmed down, everything seemed so incredible. This cool guy saved them when heavy structures fell on them, and he himself was not injured. Full of pride and dignity, Shin Ha thanked him demurely for saving her. But the agent replied that he hadn't done anything special. He couldn't just leave her behind, even though she was just another staff member. The girl immediately reared up like a wild cat, and the guy muttered that he was joking. Since he was no longer needed on site, the agent decided to return to the van. Ten Min was amazed at how many talents he had, remembering that Kang was also an excellent cook. Shinha asked the director what kind of restaurant Kang worked at, and the assistant told her it was an ordinary internet cafe. She was worried that they would not see each other on set again, but the director was very interested in the guy coming tomorrow and the day after. He was already imagining how, with Kang's help, he would win the award for Best Action Movie, and the girl clapped her hands approvingly. But she reminded me that the genre of their film is romantic comedy. But Ten Min was already riding his own wave, thinking about how he would replace all the scenes, add action, and thus solve all his problems. The assistant immediately began to grumble that they didn't have time for this and began looking for a martial arts master. But why do they need a master if they all just saw how Mr. Kang used all the tricks, calculating the position of all the cameras? The director asked him. Every minute is precious to them now. Who else can help them out in this difficult time? Shin Ha countered that the guy wasn't even an actor, and Ten Min reminded her that a real actor doesn't need a certificate. And besides, Kang is already more muscular than Yu Chang. But what will happen to the food truck? The assistant asked, since the guy came here specifically as a replacement. But the director was already determined and promised to sort everything out himself, hitting his fist into his palm. Then he quickly rushed after the guy who became their lifeline, and his assistant thought that the director had completely lost his mind. Kang, meanwhile, went outside and thought about what had happened. The whole structure seemed reliable to him. But how strange that it suddenly began to collapse, and right in the place where the actors were standing. Jin agreed with his analysis. The likelihood of foul play was high. Most of the construction parts fell on Shin Ha, Jin concluded, And if the attacker knew the scenario, it would not have been difficult for him to calculate the time and place. Someone wanted to harm her personally or prevent the release of the film as a whole, Kang suggested. And then he again saw the director rushing towards him at full speed. He suddenly grabbed the guy's hand and began to beg him to save their film. He then described all the problems from the film at length and in detail. But Jean methodically mumbled that the area was too difficult to access for regular visits, and Kang answered the director in this way: he had important business in Seoul. But Ten Min didn't give him a chance, saying that from tomorrow, by a happy coincidence, all filming would take place in Seoul. Kang still insisted he was busy, but the director promised that it wouldn't take long, if of course he could do all the stunts in one go like today. He also added conspiratorially that their company was in no position to skimp, so they would pay him handsomely. Jin instantly changed his mind, reaffirming that money was his top priority. This is what they agreed on, and director Ten Min, who had previously given up hope, now pulled himself together again and began working at an accelerated pace. Additional filming was cancelled due to a collapse on set, and instead, Ten Min wrote a different script specifically for Kang, after which everyone worked without interruption as if Ten Min's inspiration had been transmitted to the others. Now they had no hope of the film's success. Meanwhile, a car drove into the parking lot with a long drift. The head of the department, Kim, from the company that was filming this movie, jumped out of the car like a bullet. He was in a hurry to see the director, so he started shouting at the creator right from the doorway while he was immersed in editing the script. Ten Min returned the greeting, but Chief Kim said that now was not the time for pleasantries, and that he had to save the situation. Kim was worried that if the film were released in its current form, it would receive a lot of negative reviews and would definitely fail at the box office, which would harm the company. And they can't move the release time. And so on. Kim didn't stop and endlessly chattered about the problems until the director put his finger to his lips, making a hissing sound. Full of confidence, Ten Min declared that he knew how to solve all their problems. He said that from today the film will change genre and become an action movie, which caused a cry of frustration from the director. They only had a week for additional filming and editing. Kim was shouting about how they could change the genre, but the director calmed him down. But then, he saw that someone wanted to break into the area and shouted at him. Ten Min loudly scolded the scoundrel who was raising dust and interfering with his work, but he cut himself off mid-sentence. "Save and protect," Kim whispered, when he recognized the face of the person who entered. And then he bowed low, greeting the director of the company who had personally arrived here. Lee Tae-ho frowned at the chaos that reigned on the site and twitched his thin mustache in displeasure. He understood that his appearance would only cause more tension on the court, and he didn't want that. But having heard about the incident that had occurred, I could not help but show up at the scene. Kim, the manager, immediately began to justify himself by claiming that unforeseen circumstances sometimes arise. But the director immediately countered that it was precisely his job to anticipate and prevent them. Kim pitifully replied that all the problems were due to an unscrupulous actor who had gone down a wrong path. But Lee Tae-ho wouldn't hear of it. But then a little angel ran onto the set, hearing her father swear loudly. Her name was Lee Min-ji, and she had been playing children's roles since childhood. The director immediately softened and told his daughter that he was not angry with her at all, but that the loud echo was to blame for everything. And then he quietly muttered through his teeth, asking if Ten Min could finish everything in a week. The director nodded. He still hoped that Ten Min would live up to his reputation as the best director in the country. And then he told in detail about an incredible guy who would change the history of cinema, but the director had never heard of him. "He must be an incredible person. Perhaps he came from abroad to hear such things about him," said Lee Tae-ho. Then Ten Min took him outside and pointed at the food truck. At first, the director did not understand what was being discussed and what he should be looking at. "The cook who prepares a huge portion of rice is a martial arts master," he finally said, his tone full of disbelief. And he stared in amazement at Kang, who was calmly stirring the rice. "But why is the master cooking rice?" The director was surprised. "It's his job," the director answered just as confidently. What was happening was increasingly looking like a ridiculous prank or an outright lie, so Tae-ho became angry. This chef was hired as a martial artist, and he also doubled for Yu-chan in the action scenes. The director repeated everything he heard, and the director nodded his head vigorously. "What kind of joke is this?" The director was indignant. "They are already on deadline, and they are brazenly deceiving him here," he hissed at Ten Min. He accused the director of simply wanting to bury the film and pocket part of the budget for himself. A heated argument ensued as Ten Min tried to explain everything. But the director was adamant and demanded that after filming, he submit a report detailing every expense down to the last penny. And then he turned to leave, not listening to the director's excuses, and told manager Kim to check all the reports later. Meanwhile, the little girl tried the signature dessert from the culinary master from the future. Mixie, Kang told her the name of the dessert. It sounded strange, but it was very tasty. He told the little girl that he had done this to all the workers, so she could eat as much as she wanted. But then the girl remembered that her mother forbade her to eat a lot and to take sweets and did not allow her to eat sweets, and her sweet face became sad. Kang said that she could do with gaining some weight, but proudly throwing back her hair, the young actress declared that she had the lead role in the film, so she couldn't follow his advice. She played the child version of the main character, meaning she was playing the lead role, and she also asked the guy to make her this dessert tomorrow. Since filming was scheduled to take place in Seoul the next day, Kang would not be cooking, so upon learning of this, the little girl decided to hide some dessert in her father's car. He offered to cook her some more if she went to the computer club with her parents, and the girl handed him the phone. She asked him to leave his contact information and sign himself Uncle Mixie, and Kang granted this request. The cameraman who overheard the director and the producer arguing asked his boss to at least look at the footage once. After all, he knew Tenmin's character very well, who was known for his boring perfectionism and would never praise a bad job. And then Lee Tae-ho thought there was meaning in the assistant's words. Since he insisted so much, the director decided to take a look once, and then he saw a masterpiece filmed in one take. Everything looked so cool, as if they had already added computer graphics to it. And when would they have had time to rehearse the movement like that? The director asked in amazement. And then the director declared that these clean frames had not yet been touched by the hand of an editor or a retoucher. This guy moved by himself, calculating the viewing angles of all the cameras. Some chef managed to film everything in one take. Lee Tae-ho's mouth dropped open in amazement. And then they told him about how the structure collapsed and the guy, without knowing it, saved Shin-ha. Now the director realized his mistake and felt a pang of conscience. He shouldn't have yelled at Tenmin like that. He even asked for forgiveness, but the director only laughed. If the director had remained stubborn even after these shots, he would have called him a donkey. And then Lee Tae-ho came to thank the talented boy. Kang handed him a glass of snacks, although that was not why the director had come. Lee Tae-ho introduced himself and said that he was the director and sponsor of this film, and the guy literally saved his project, so he was grateful to him. Kang, as usual, modestly replied that he had done what he had to. The director praised his martial arts skills, but then his attention was drawn to the dessert. Something like crackers, Kang said, and offered him to try. He often ate crackers in the army, so this food did not bring back pleasant memories for the director. But in order not to offend Kang, he decided to eat a couple of pieces. And then his soul was transported to heaven. The taste was sweet, salty, and slightly spicy all at once. The crackers were fried, but there was no hint of oil at all. So Lee Tae-ho let out a loud cry of delight and surprise. His daughter also loves such treats, the director said. And Kang, realizing he was talking about Min-ji, said she'd already been here. Tae-ho brushed away a stingy man's tear and hoped that his little girl had behaved decently. And then he began to call his daughter to enjoy the meal together. But the girl did not respond, and Kang asked Jin to scan the area and find Min-ji. The puppeteer also did not find the girl nearby. Then the agent decided to check inside the building, but there was no sign of her presence there either. But then his phone rang and he was surprised to discover that it was Min-ji, and the girl's father was no less surprised. Kang explained that it was all for snacks and picked up the phone. He heard strange sounds and his face darkened. Kang remained silent, and this only caused more concern to the director. He already understood that something bad had happened. Without answering, Kang walked towards the parking lot. Agent Jin asked what the chances were that the girl simply dropped the phone and broke it. He reported that it was low, as the sound was clearly different. Kang asked to analyze the last call and listen to the puppeteer's memories. The sound came from a soft object in a hard shell, the sound of plastic covered with a steel plate. A reflected sound in a closed space, Jin analyzed. Kang considered the options of what it could be, and the only thing that came to mind was a car. The villains who kidnapped the girl were arguing. One of them accused the other of allowing the girl to call. But now they could still be suspected, even though the phone was simply broken. The main scoundrel, who was shouting the loudest at everyone, yelled at the girl and asked who she was calling, even though her mouth was taped. On the screen of the broken phone, they read, Uncle Mixie. The bandit kidnapper made a spiteful remark about this and promised to buy the baby some food and then ordered them to leave this place quietly. The worried father still questioned the boy, asking what had happened. His daughter called him, and now he was silent, and this only increased the director's suspicions. Jin activated the hostage rescue protocol and immediately noticed the girl's things in the parking lot, a child's purse and a cup of snacks. As Kang came closer, Jin confirmed his suspicions. The puppeteer immediately noticed a car with dark-tinted windows. The crumbs of the treat led straight to her, and the agent took aim at her. He rushed to the car without explaining anything to the director. When he chased the guy, he saw his daughter's purse on the ground. And then everything inside him went cold. The villain sitting behind the wheel stared out the window in surprise. "Someone is running towards them," he addressed the elder. He loudly shouted at the fool for being able to watch everything so calmly and ordered him to step on the gas. The car instantly accelerated, burning its tires. "There's no doubt it's an enemy and they've spotted it," Jin said methodically. Running past a road sign, Kang strained himself and pulled it out of the ground like a young sapling. And then he sped up to catch up with the car that hadn't managed to leave the parking lot. "What a crazy fool who can catch up with a car on foot," laughed the senior kidnapper. But just in case, he ordered me to press the gas pedal to the floor. At this time, Minju could only mentally call out to her parents for help. And then the senior kidnapper shouted that the pursuer had disappeared from sight. He sighed with relief, thinking that the poor guy had simply fallen and was tired of running. However, at this time, Kang simply activated his attack helicopter mode and took off, in order to land right on the roof of a moving car. He spun the pipe from the road sign in his hand, and with its help he pierced the thin roof of the car like a spear, frightening the hapless kidnappers. The driver lost control and sent the car into a skid. Kang held onto the sign's pipe as if it were the mast of a ship caught in a storm. He ordered Jean to find a way to stop the car, and Jean advised him to look at the hood. It was necessary to puncture one place so that the engine power would drop, and then Kang would take the mast out of the roof. With a powerful movement, he pierced the tin hood at the indicated place. The engine began to stall, and Kang looked at the scoundrels meaningfully. "What kind of monster was this?" the terrified villain screamed. The senior kidnapper saw that the pursuer was not holding on and told him to throw him off. Then the driver suddenly slammed on the brakes, and Kang flew further by inertia. Everyone who became involuntary witnesses of this skirmish gasped loudly at that moment. "What a fool!" shouted the main kidnapper, pleased with himself. But instead of simply rolling head over heels and falling, Kang turned his flight into a controlled jump. He rolled over several times to stabilize his movement and landed deftly on the ground. Blue, chilling eyes looked angrily at the kidnappers. Jin announced that the car had stopped. Minji received hope again after hearing that Kang had survived. The villains again tried to start the engine and leave the place. But the car wouldn't start again, and the kidnappers started arguing again, and they were all in a great panic. Then the elder kicked his accomplices out so that they could quickly deal with the annoying guy. He himself volunteered to guard the hostage, in case she suddenly ran away. Two bandits came out to meet Kang. Instead of getting down to business right away, they started scolding the guy and asking who he was and what area he was from. An ordinary cook answered the agent and gave them his business card. A couple of hits from the helicopter and the hooligan was blown away like the wind. The agent made a couple of jumps with the agility of a cat and found himself on the hood of the car, behind the second blockhead. The fat man realized that his opponent was too fast and he couldn't keep up with him, so he pulled out his knife. But then he received a kick in the jaw from a hoof. Now they both lay on the ground and thought about their behavior. The agent from the future headed towards the car. He knew the hostage was still there. Seeing his face, the main kidnapper screamed in horror and began to pray to God. He pulled back from the window and gripped the hostage tighter. Kang peered inside through the tinted glass and assessed the situation. And then he waved to the girl and smiled, making it clear that everything would be fine. Minjai immediately calmed down and stopped trembling. The agent asked Jin how to deal with the latest kidnapper. The puppeteer had several options: break the glass and grab the villain, or lure him out of the car. Kang liked the second option better, because otherwise Minji could have gotten hurt. He deliberately moved away so that the kidnapper would lower his guard, as Jin had advised him. Seeing that his pursuer had moved away, the villain was very surprised. Through the windshield he saw people already running towards them, which meant they had to leave quickly. So, getting out of the car, he pressed a knife to Minju's throat and told Kang to bring another car or he would kill the girl. What a piece of trash, the agent thought. Seeing that he had been kidnapped and taken hostage, Lee Tae-ho was horrified and tore his hair out. He ordered manager Kim to immediately give the car to those scoundrels. And then he rushed towards the kidnapper and said that he would do everything. He promised to give him a car. But if even one hair fell from his daughter, he would wipe the scoundrel's entire family off the face of the earth. The bandit recognized the girl's father and grinned. The director rushed to his car. People in the parking lot were quickly thinking about how to help. They could discreetly call the police, but due to the great distance, they were unlikely to arrive quickly. The director got into the car. He thought only about how to save his girl. And the transport quickly rolled up to the kidnapper. Jin warned that with this transport, the kidnapper would definitely be able to escape. The director got out of the car. With tears in his eyes, he demanded that the kidnapper not touch his daughter. The little girl started crying when she saw her father. The kidnapper pointed a knife at the director and ordered him to move further away from the car. When he began to move away, he himself moved after him. But then the director committed a crazy stupidity. Succumbing to emotions, he rushed towards the kidnapper, and Minji shouted that he would definitely save her. Naturally, the kidnapper began threatening with a knife again. The agent from the future flashed his blue eyes and took aim, and then blood spurted. And unexpectedly for everyone, the scoundrel fell unconscious. Kang, guided by the puppeteer, hit the target accurately from about 40 meters away. Considering his strength, the throw was lethal. Then the director quickly grabbed his daughter and hugged her tightly. He carefully peeled the tape off her face and the girl began to cry. The police arrived at the scene later in the evening. The police noted a bruised jaw, broken ribs, and a traumatic brain injury. The scoundrels suffered quite a lot. The villains did not look very pleasant, especially since they were all lying there with wet pants. The third one really needed an ambulance, otherwise his meager brains could leak out. But then the director intervened in their conversation and said that the scoundrels needed a chopping block, not a hospital. First, they had to take care of his daughter, who was almost kidnapped. But the service people said that these scoundrels also needed to be treated. Shinji was worried that the savior uncle whose hand she held could now be sent to prison. And it was all because of her that the girl was worried. And Kang comfortingly stroked the little girl's head. The agent told her not to worry because her father saved her, which means he will save him too. Jean phlegmatically stated that now was the best time to escape the police and was ready to activate the prison escape protocol. But the agent still placed his faith in the director's conscience. He was amazed that the guy so carefully preserved his authority in front of his daughter and attributed the merits of the rescue to him. So he immediately began to defend Kang because he had saved them, and even if the scoundrels had died, it wouldn't have been his fault. But the meticulous police demanded proof. But what kind of surveillance cameras could there be in the mountains? Lee Tae-ho was amazed, and then the director's shadow appeared behind him. Of course there are cameras here, he whispered conspiratorially. He held a laptop in his hands and handed it to the cops. He had recordings of much better quality than a cheap CCTV camera could provide. It turned out that 10 men managed to film everything and clearly captured the faces of the kidnappers. The footage showed that they were scoundrels and threatened everyone with weapons. All of 10 men's team members are masters of their craft. And as soon as something interesting was about to happen, they would rush there with cameras, the director explained to the police. Based on these videos, Kang was innocent. Jin deactivated the prison escape protocol. There can be no talk of punishment, even if the 3 kidnappers die, the director repeated again. But if they dared to bring charges against him, then the director promised to deploy the company's entire information department against them. He could have involved the legal department, but they wouldn't be able to do anything about the torrent of anger that would fall on them, the director warned. Kang told the police that he had to cook dinner for the team, and they didn't have to worry about him running away. Night fell over the mountains, and to ease all the stress from the day, the agent prepared a special dessert for the girl. Even though her appetite hadn't returned yet, she should still try it, Kang told her. Jin gave a boring lecture on the benefits of desserts on the battlefield. Kang didn't listen to the boring puppeteer and waited. Her father was worried that she would have no appetite, but Minji immediately put the fork in her mouth. And then, the director also liked the food. The director asked Kang for the recipe so he could cook it at home, but the chef told him that after watching the guy, he came to the conclusion that no one could repeat what he did. First of all, you need to be very strong to mix all the ingredients for so long and so thoroughly, and also have a natural talent for calculating spices. The director noted that such skill was on par with that of chefs in the best restaurants. But Kang modestly replied that he was an ordinary cook in a computer club. Then, the director was very surprised by this answer. And then he heard the angry voice of his wife and mother Minji. How could he enjoy food after what happened? She screamed as soon as she got out of the car with her manager. Despite her beauty, this woman began to beat her negligent husband because, in her opinion, he did not look after his daughter well enough. And then she immediately switched on the caring mother mode and asked tenderly if everything was okay with her daughter. The beaten husband spoke up again, trying to explain himself. But Chanmi's eyes flashed with anger again, and no amount of pleading for mercy helped him. The director watched this family scene with pleasure. For the first time, he saw so many different faces of the director. In the end, Chanmi's manager had to calm her boss down so that she wouldn't take away Lee Ho's eyes. "There are simply too many prying eyes here," she said, and promised to eliminate her son-in-law without witnesses or the police. After the dust settled, Jiangmi thanked Kang for saving her daughter. She'd seen everything in the director's recordings. The agent, as usual, replied that he'd done what he had to. And yet, he jumped onto a moving car, stopped it, and confronted the man with a knife, risking his life greatly, Chanmi noted. And that's what would have happened had Kang been an ordinary person. The embarrassed agent replied that it wasn't hard, earning a look of admiration from Chanmi at his coolness. And little Minji reminded him that Kang had promised her dessert. The guy agreed but asked to warn him in advance, since he was often not at his workplace at the club, and the girl happily agreed. At this point, Chanmi took her daughter, because she still had to get up for school the next day and it was already late, and the principal had to stay. When they left, Lee Ho admitted that without this guy's help, they were in a difficult situation. He thanked him sincerely and bowed, saying that he owed dinner. Kang immediately agreed, and Shinha was already waiting impatiently behind him. When the director left, she coughed softly. And then, like a fox, she narrowed her eyes slyly and said that she had noticed his cooking skills and waving his fists. And now he had also heroically prevented a kidnapping, which meant that he had lied about being a simple club employee. Kang stated that it was true, but the cunning girl demanded proof, the address of the club, and her phone number. The agent didn't deny it and fulfilled her request, which made Shinha barely contain her joy. The girl immediately stopped herself and said that she didn't want his phone number at all. She just wanted to visit a computer club sometime. The agent simply nodded in response. He didn't have the club's number, so it was no big deal if he gave his own. Besides, the more customers, the higher his salary. Shinha, on the other hand, became flustered and embarrassed. But then they heard someone's loud and angry shouts. The principal was furious because someone uploaded a video of his daughter's rescue online. He shouted in front of a crowd of crew members because it had to be one of them. Meanwhile, the public relations manager was already calling him. The director then ordered all videos to be removed from the network. But this could no longer be done because the video had gone viral on the internet. Then, Lee Ho ordered to find the one who arranged this leak. With anxiety in his voice, the director called his lively wife again. Little Minji was already asleep in the car, tired from all the shocks. He told her how things were and that the rescue video could no longer be stopped. The director asked her not to worry, saying that as soon as he found the culprit, he would deal with him. And then, unexpectedly for himself, he heard in response that Minji herself had done it. The girl really liked this video and was delighted. Uncle Mixie looked like a movie hero, so Minji immediately posted the video online. The country should know its heroes, the little girl thought, and her mother did not object. Then the director stood there with his mouth open, not knowing what to say to that. And then he saw the shadow of the director in front of him, and he was very disappointed in his people. Thinking that his team had betrayed him, the director began to scold everyone for no reason. The next day, the computer club team also watched the video, and they were deeply impressed. They didn't believe that this was a real video. It looked more like a promotional video being filmed before the release of a movie. The girls agreed to go to see the movie together when it came out, and Han Sung also wanted to join them. But the observant Yuna was more observant, and it seemed to her that the guy in the video slightly resembled Kang. The video quality was too low to see properly, but now the guy's figure seemed familiar too. So in too, though she still couldn't understand how it was possible. It was too much even for him. In the meantime, they'd completely forgotten about Song Han. Meanwhile, a new star of local cinema shone on the stage. As usual, with the help of Jean, the agent performed amazing and dizzying stunts. He had it all planned out and acted as if he had rehearsed this scene many times. Another roundhouse kick and another movie bandit fell to the ground. The film finally turned into an action movie, although for some reason Shinha was saved again. The actress no longer had to feign admiration and awe because they were already evident on her face. The fight scenes were finished, and Kang switched with Yu Chan, who was already doing the close-up scenes. At this point, the episode ended and the director shouted "cut" across the entire set. However, there was one thing Ten Min didn't like. The action scenes were flawless, but in the middle of the scene, Shinha's gaze changed when she stopped looking at Kang. The embarrassed girl stated in her defense that the director had not yet woken up after a sleepless night. Ten Min dropped the matter and ran up to the guy to praise him for his work. Thanks to him, everything was going smoothly. He was free today, and even director Lee Ho came over to acknowledge the guy's work. The agent asked how things were going with the rescue video, and the director became sad because there was nothing more that could be done. Luckily, many people mistook this for a promotional video for the film's release. So, having put pressure on all the witnesses, the director decided to continue to play along with this misconception of the fans. The director himself was alarmed by this. After all, his daughter was almost kidnapped and now it had become public knowledge. And then the director changed the subject, again praising the talents of the guy who was saving their film. Shin Ha had previously been a supporting actress, but now her role had become one of the leading ones, the director declared. The girl quickly straightened her hair, proud of herself. Then the director called Kang to dinner, and everyone was indignant that it was only him. Shin Ha and Yu-chan did a good job so they can go with him, but the director is waiting for the editing, the director said. Jin reminded the agent that this was the same gourmet meal that the director had promised, so the guy had to agree. They really did throw a sumptuous royal feast. That's why Jin didn't let up and asked the agent to try everything. Surprisingly, even the puppeteer had his own wild side. Shin Ha picked up the jug of rice water to pour some for Kang, but Yu-chan argued with her that it was his responsibility. However, the girl did not back down, so a heated argument ensued between them. Each of them wanted to express their gratitude more strongly. But in the end, the director was the one who filled the guy's glass. Holding a porcelain glass in his hands, he said that he had always dreamed of becoming a director. Since college, he had been aware of all the events in the world of the film industry, and even made several amateur films, but they failed. After several failures, he realized he had no talent. His father told him to just work for his company, but Lee Ho didn't want to give up his business and went into production. The director was so open with his feelings that the brawlers listened to him. Kang supported the director, who said he had succeeded, but he modestly noted that it was all thanks to the support of his parents, who had resolved all financial issues. If this film were to fail, his family would give Lee Ho a severe dressing down, and it's not even because he founded the company against his family's wishes. Lee Ho's father owned weapons factories, and they supplied their products to different countries. His father even gave him part of the shares. Their company was very large and profitable, but of course his share cannot be sold. However, this film became Lee Ho's largest investment, around 10 billion won, and the director used his shares as collateral. Shin Ha was amazed by this. Obviously, if the film flopped, they would somehow pay off the debts. But if Lee Ho's father found out that his son had pawned the shares, he would take a golf club with him to the educational talk. The actress laughed because the director was clearly already over 40. Yu Chang praised the director for his courage, but asked what would happen if the film flopped. The risk was enormous, and the director still had goosebumps from the incompetent man who was caught using illegal substances. The name of the director's father's company, Keoling Engineering, was mentioned in passing. Jin immediately said that his records contained information about this company. This corporation produced obsolete equipment that was still occasionally used in some regions in 2082. However, his report also indicated that the models produced in 24 were the last. Kang wanted details and again didn't notice that he was speaking out loud, so Shin Ha thought that he had already become more cheerful. Although the equipment was outdated, it was still in use in many places, and preserved examples sell for high prices. Jean was surprised how such a successful company could suddenly go bankrupt. Now Kang looked at all the events in a new light. Minji's kidnapping, the drug incident, the collapse of the platform, all of this could be connected. Lee Ho saw that the guy was thinking about something and asked him what he was upset about. And Kang admitted that he had thought about his problem. If the film flopped at the box office, the shares would be lost, which could jeopardize his father's rights to run the company, he concluded. The director said that this would only happen if he couldn't return the money. Of course, his father would immediately throw him out of the share, but the assets would be safe. But Agent Kang didn't think it was that simple. On the very first day of reshoots, the suspended structures collapsed, and someone could have orchestrated it. The timing was just too opportune. The director agreed with this suspicion and explained that the police had conducted a thorough investigation, and some of the debris was still being carefully examined. But the young man was unconvinced. He was certain the investigation would find nothing. A week ago, the leading actor was arrested during a party with illegal substances. But what's even more suspicious is that the police raided this party while investigating a completely different case of an arsonist. Yu Chang asked the agent how this related to the film, and Kang chuckled. The point was that the killer's arsonist was an unforeseen circumstance. Because of this incident, scenes in the film had to be reshot a week before the premiere. But what if the actor had been arrested later, for example, the day before the premiere, Kang asked, and everyone perked up. They wouldn't have time to re-edit the film and reshoot the scenes, the director realized. All the perpetrators had to do was release a video of the band party right before the film's release. Shin-ha and Yu-chan shuddered. They were young actors and could easily ruin their careers with a flop. After the failure, Lee-ho would turn to his father to borrow money and save the shares. But if the movie failed, his father's company would also be in jeopardy, Kang explained. The corporation might not have been in a position to provide support, since money doesn't just come out of thin air. Lee-ho was confident that he would use all his connections. He was ready to sell his company to get his money back. But what would he do if Min-ji was kidnapped? Kang asked. And it was as if he fired a pistol at point-blank range with this question. Could the director have collected his thoughts to save his assets, because it was not only about the losses due to the film? He would have given everything to save his daughter. Someone had set a carefully prepared trap and was driving the beast into it with all their might. The Arms Corporation's shares could have simply evaporated if investors had learned of the family's problems. All this was necessary to take over the director's father's company, Yu Chang realized. But his arrival on set that day wasn't planned. Lee-ho objected. He was supposed to accompany his daughter to a photo shoot. Kang responded that the director would have definitely arrived if he'd learned of the collapse, right on top of the actors. Whoever carried out the collapse and the kidnapping was most likely the same interested agent. Shin-ha slammed the table indignantly upon learning that someone had intended to harm her. Kang tried his best to calm the unruly girl, as they hadn't actually been aiming at her and were unlikely to have intended to cause serious injury. But the actress was already demanding a fair trial for the scoundrels and was eager for their capture. The agent indifferently replied that criminals were unlikely to be so careless about details. At this time, an interrogation was taking place at the police station. However, to the detriment of law enforcement agencies, the captured perpetrators knew nothing about the customer. 3 scoundrels claimed that they came to the site themselves, having heard that the director was there, and decided to kidnap his daughter, knowing how rich he was. The madmen hoped there were no security cameras in the mountains, allowing them to escape. But who alerted them to Director Lee-ho's arrival? The senior investigator asked. None of them remembered the man. They just overheard him in some bar, the junior sergeant said with annoyance. So the investigation reached a dead end. Of course, the whole scenario with the theft of shares will only work if the film flops at the box office, Kang said, and chuckled. The agent advised everyone to treat it like a good story and not worry so much. Shin-ha responded by suggesting he write screenplays. Yu Chang immediately wanted to be the lead in this work, and the proud girl protested that this time the leading role should go to her. But director Lee-ho was clearly alarmed. Later, they went outside when it was already completely dark, and only the streetlights illuminated the road. Shin-ha suggested going for a second try, and Yu-chan, who was getting ready to go home, immediately agreed. And director Lee-ho was only thinking that he had made a big mistake and would never take out a loan against his father's shares again. The weapons corporation was reliable, otherwise the attackers would not have taken such a risk to harm it. At least this year director Lee-ho will be safe, thought the agent. And then he felt someone poking him in the back with a slender finger. How about a drink? Shin-ha suggested, pointing to herself and looking him straight in the eye, charmingly. Kang agreed, but when the 3 of them were alone, Shin-ha got angry at him again. That same evening, Lee-ho told his father about this whole story, and naturally, his father was furious at his son's arrogance. No amount of justification that the film's success was guaranteed and that it would improve their company's image helped. The head of the family, Jong-mil, told his son to shut up. Lee-ho's brother, Lee Song, was also in a bad mood, and the news about the bail only added to their troubles. Lee-ho was surprised, as he'd heard the company had developed a successful new product, and export negotiations were proceeding smoothly. But now rumors of a merger were swirling in the media, and someone was stirring up trouble to disrupt the overseas supply tenders. The youngest son was extremely outraged by this, so much so that he even screamed. He was always unrestrained. Whoever started all this could also be connected to the kidnapping of his daughter, because Lee-ho was screaming despite being next to his father. His brother told him to calm down. Perhaps this move was made by one of the competitors' companies, but he was more worried about brokers wanting to take over and resell their business. Then their father decided to sum it up and asked Lee-ho if he was confident in the success of the film. He was ready to swear on his life. Everything turned out even better than originally planned thanks to the stunt double who saved him. he told his father. This man saved the film, saved Minji and Lee Ho himself, precisely because he decided to come today and talk to the family. Lee Song looked at his brother doubtfully, needing someone to explain everything to him. If Lee Ho's company isn't under threat, they shouldn't fear outside attacks either, said Lee Song's father. Lee Song nodded and noted that they should strengthen their defenses just in case. That's what they decided on, and the father got up, and he warned that if his son touched the shares again, he would disown him. As a businessman, he solved all the problems and went to bed. Lee Ho bowed low to his father and promised not to let him down again. Before leaving, his father suggested that Lee Ho arrange for the actor who helped him get a good role with a lot of screen time, because it was worth repaying the one who did so much. But Kang had already outgrown the level of their local cinema, Lee Ho thought. A few days later, the agent and his entire team went to the premiere screening of the film. The day before, Kang handed the cutie Seo a ticket and invited her to go to the premiere with him. The girl hesitated to answer, and then the agent simply turned around, accepting this as a refusal, so she quickly agreed, because there was someone in the cafe to replace her. Yuna and Songhan were hoping to follow the guys, but Kang reminded them that they had the night shift. But Yuna didn't give up, saying that a few days ago more people had joined them, and that a robot vacuum cleaner was now doing the cleaning. The friends were so excited because they had recently watched a promotional video featuring Kang and were deeply impressed. Now it became clear to them why the hero in that video, where he saved Minji, looked so much like a guy, so Yuna was going to go to the premiere of his debut film, even if it meant missing a shift. They were passionate about expressing their fan loyalty to the hero, and not skipping their shift as he first thought. Since this was the first screening of the film, it was turned into a whole event attended by the crew and actors who starred in it. Yu-chan and Shin-ha sparkled in the countless flashes of cameras. Shin-ha acted cute and posed happily. Quite a few people had already gathered in the lobby. Seo In thought that Kang would be among the stars, but the agent explained to the girl that his face would not be shown in the film. Yu-chan noticed the guy and Jin warned him about it. Kang also looked at the young actor. He waved his hand at him, and Yuna, who was standing nearby, slapped the agent on the shoulder in delight. She thought that Yu-chan smiled and waved directly at her. And even Songhan's objection that Yu-chan was most likely waving to the photographers did not convince the young fan. Shin-ha also noticed a tall guy with broad shoulders, and after their fun get-togethers, she decided to call him Appa. And she also waved welcomingly in their direction. But this time, Songhan was speechless. He immediately flared up, because the goddess Shin-ha herself turned her gaze on him, and Yuna was already trying to calm him down. The couple started a loud argument, each not wanting to part with the sweet delusion, and Kang suggested going inside, only now noticing that So-in was not around. But suddenly, it turned out that the cutie from the computer club was standing face-to-face with a supporting actress. Yuna immediately jumped closer, thinking that her friend was getting an autograph from the star. Looking at both girls, Kang was surprised to think that they knew each other. Shin-ha was also surprised that Uncle Seo-in owns the internet cafe where Kang works. Both girls were so beautiful that they could easily be mistaken for sisters. But In Seo reminded the boisterous Sunghan that they had different last names. The girls simply lived in the same neighborhood as children, and then In Seo knew all the young actress's dark secrets. She reminded her friend that witnesses don't live long. Yu Chang also approached them and complained that he was already tired of waving to Kang, and the latter was surprised that they could even get closer since there were a lot of reporters there. Mere mortals Yuna and Song Han were immediately amazed by the degree of intimacy between their friends and the stars. Song Han was already thinking about becoming an actor himself, but he caught a look full of skepticism. And then little Min Ji burst onto the playground and started calling for Uncle Mixie. Kang easily caught her in his arms and asked the girl how she was. Minju did not get bored at all thanks to him. Following her, Minji's parents approached the hero who saved their daughter and said that they had reserved the best seats for him. Kang objected that he already had a seat, but director Lee Ho wouldn't hear of the film's main character sitting on the sidelines. The cascade of these events left fans completely delighted. Yuna also decided to learn how to cook and work part-time everywhere. Later, they all went into the hall and took their seats. Director Ten Min was sitting next to Kang and he offered the guy to come out with the team to greet him, but the guy still refused. A film's premiere only happens once, Ten Min said, completely giving into the mood, and besides, if it weren't for the guy's help, it wouldn't have happened at all. And he again thanked Kang heartily. And then the movie started and the room fell silent, and the agent leaned back in his chair. For the first time in a long time, he could just relax. The computer club employees sat nearby and also enjoyed the movie. When the screening began, loud screams and sighs could be heard from the audience. Screenings are usually quiet, so even the cinema staff were surprised. And then the lights came back on in the hall, and it became quiet until the first person jumped up to clap. Others stood up after him, and the whole hall applauded enthusiastically. Jin didn't forget to praise himself for this success, and Kang smiled. Making films was fun. After watching the film, everyone started discussing it, and its mixed genre of romance and action was to their liking. Then the film's leading figures took the stage, and the director thanked everyone who came to the premiere. And then he said he had something he wanted to confess. In fact, the scene with the collapse of the structures was a real incident. Min understood that many would not appreciate such a risk. He assured everyone that no one had staged such an incident. They had simply used camera footage and inserted it with the consent of all participants. Of course, no one was hurt, the director assured everyone. If this incident had had serious consequences, they would not have used it. Then, Kang remembered director Lee Ho's words that he would figure out how to properly present everything to the public. Journalists began asking questions from the audience. The first one was addressed to Shin Ha. They wanted to know if she had undergone any treatment. In the movie, the girl looked shocked, so she could have suffered emotionally. But Shin Ha assured him that she was completely healthy. Then they turned to Yu Chan, thinking that it was he who saved the girl. But the actor modestly noted that if he were there, he would already be in the grave. And then he admitted that it was the man from the food truck who did it. This treatment caused a pang of irritation in Kang. After all, he and Yu Chang were the same age in appearance. Yu Chang told everyone that this man was his stunt double because they had similar builds and looked towards Kang. So despite his request to have those words cut from the article because his savior was not a public figure, he still paid tribute to him. 2 days later, the film topped all popularity charts as Yuna happily informed him. Kang was surprised that she called this film ours, even though she had nothing to do with it. But the girl brazenly declared that since Kang was like a brother to her, and they were practically family, then everything the family did had something to do with her. Yuna asked him why he didn't act in another film, but the agent thought one film was enough, and the girl sighed sadly. She also wanted to see celebrities. He's already busy, Kang replied, but Yuna was indignant that no, what else is he doing besides cooking at the club? A special mission for the Earth Alliance, the agent answered her with a serious face. Yuna stared at him in surprise, not knowing how to react, and thought that he was just joking. Director Lee Ho beamed with happiness and did not hide his joy, laughing loudly. They succeeded and even avoided a huge disaster. Ming, who was with him in the office, winked and was sure they would get millions of views. Lee Ho echoed him in his praise. The first few days, the theaters were empty. Rumors about the film's problems kept people from showing up, but those who dared quickly spread their enthusiasm online. Min was already considering his next film as a noir action film, although he had previously specialized in romance. If they had Kang, the director immediately promised to start writing the script. Then Lee Ho, in a serious voice, suggested that they work together on the next film and shoot it at the company's expense. And he asked if Min had discussed everything with Kang, but it turned out that he was just getting ready, hoping that the guy would agree. And then they called him immediately, without putting things off. Kang saw the unknown number calling him and pressed the end button. Yu Chan and Shin Ha came to the studio for an interview about the film on the wave of its success. The film became very popular and the actors were asked how it affected them. Yu Chan immediately said that he was inundated with offers for interviews and advertising. Many were still surprised that the film used real footage, and Shin Ha described in detail how her stunt double saved her by knocking off all the metal parts. It sounded dangerous, and the host asked Yu Chan where he was at that moment. The actor said he was thrown into the distance with his first move, but the flight wasn't as dramatic, so it wasn't included in the film. Shin Ha glanced nervously at her colleague, worried he might be misunderstood. The host admired the stuntman's skill, and Shin Ha, with a smile on her face, told them that this guy was not even a professional, but an ordinary guy from a food truck. And he even jumped onto a moving car without any safety net and stopped it with one blow of the pipe. Yu Chang echoed her, forgetting that he should remain silent. And then the actors realized that they had said too much, and their frightened faces spoke more than eloquently about it. Shinha tried to change the subject and said that their stuntman friend was also an excellent cook. And then the first question from the audience was sent to the studio. Was the stunt with the car also staged? Both actors realized they were in for a trap, as the interview was being broadcast live. Director Lee Ho was furious that the idiot Yu Chang couldn't keep his mouth shut. He immediately ordered his men to develop a strategy for what to do about it. The public relations manager said they would simply have to reveal the truth 20 days earlier than planned. There was no other way to take control of the situation, because if we delay it, it will only get worse. With a heavy sigh, the director picked up the phone and called Kang. The guy understood everything and asked why they didn't tell everyone about the incident on the day of the incident. Lee Ho replied that they were just lucky, but now there was only one way to deal with this problem. They intended to make people view this incident as a heroic feat rather than a horrific incident. And instead of pitying Minji, they wanted to emphasize Kang's awesomeness. The guy agreed to anything as long as his name wasn't mentioned, while the radio station took a break. Yu Chang apologized for a long time to the manager in the corner, holding the phone to his ear. He was willing to do anything to help them, short of quitting his acting career. And then his manager told him to tell the truth. Yu Chang immediately lost it, not knowing what to do, and the manager yelled at him to pull himself together. The actor had to describe everything he saw and knew in the most vivid terms. They had no choice but to make public what they were only going to tell in 20 days. The manager told the actor to make it sound like nothing serious had happened, just that the guy from the van had saved the girl. When the pause ended, Yu Chang said that he would talk about this incident. He was just waiting for the right moment. It happened on the first day of reshoots while everyone was busy. 3 attackers tried to kidnap Minji. From what her friend Minha said, she understood that the company simply decided to dump everything as is. Meanwhile, Yu Chang added fuel to the fire of citizens' interest by colorfully describing everything that Kang had done. The amount of information about him has increased critically, Jin concluded in a creaky voice. Kang decided not to worry for now, since his name was still not revealed. In the meantime, the agent asked the puppeteer if he could participate in the Olympic Games, but Jin concluded that the guy would not pass a doping test. Any professional sport was forbidden to him, and Kang lazily sprawled out in bed, not really wanting to, he muttered. Moreover, he had to leave this temporary base and establish a permanent one in order to maintain combat readiness, the puppeteer methodically stated. His payment for the film came in recently, so there should be enough money. In one fell swoop, the guy got 5 million won, but he still wasn't happy with it. After hearing the news and rumors about the film, Yuna stated that she knew Kang was in that promo. In a lazy mood, she and Song Han continued to rewatch videos and read various rumors. But the guy thought about the fact that he had met a man similar to Kang. Memories of how he was rescued from captivity by bandits still glimmered in his head. Kang, who was lying in the utility room, scratched his reddened ears and thought that someone was discussing him right now. That same day, Shinha showed up at the club wearing dark glasses, hoping to hide from the paparazzi. She went up to the cash register and asked if this was the cafe where Kang worked. Song Han almost screamed in delight at the entire cafe upon recognizing the young actress. But Cutie Seo-in quickly covered his mouth with her hand. She asked her friend what brought her here, and Shinha replied that she wanted to see Kang. And besides, she had heard that the food here was delicious. Seo-in said that Kang was now in her room, which puzzled her friend. She could not even imagine that her savior lived in a utility room not named after his house. So-in herself didn't know why this was so, but Kang ate and slept here. She assumed that the guy simply ran away from home. Seo-in was already thinking about asking the guy to live with her, although it was a little embarrassing to live with a man. But of course, Kang wouldn't do that, both girls thought. Before they entered the utility room, Jin warned Kang, who rose from the couch. He already knew that Shinha was behind the door, and immediately asked her why she came. The girl said that she came to apologize for what Yu-chan had said back then. The agent was surprised, since it wasn't her fault. But the girl thought otherwise. After all, she was there, although Yu-chan should have been taught to keep her mouth shut. Even though the actor didn't let it slip on purpose, he was now getting a lot of flack from Minji and her mother. However, going all this way just to apologize was too expensive, Kang said, and looked at the girl's blushing face. And then Shinha used the argument of delicious food, which is why she came here. But Kang indifferently replied that he was not cooking today because he had things to do. The agent told her that he would look for housing since this kennel was not very comfortable. Shinha was surprised that he really lived here, but the agent calmly replied that he had his own reasons for this. But his indifference only further fueled the girl's sympathy, as she considered the guy mysterious. She immediately declared that she would go with him, because it was useful to have someone nearby who could help with advice. Even though Kang could have gone alone, the girl still followed him. The place had a refrigerator, a sink, an old air conditioner, everything he needed. But Shinha was surprised again, knowing the guy had been well paid. Why did such a talented guy first live in a cafe, and now want to live in a one-room apartment given that he received a generous fee. She offered to help with the choice, but when she heard that the guy only received 5 million, she was stunned. And then she called her older sister, who was also Minji's mother. She picked up the phone and asked if the younger one was going to ask for mercy for Yu Chang. The poor guy was suffering right now. But the girl didn't care at all about the fate of the pretty fool. She hesitated for a long time, not knowing where to begin her conversation. And then she said that Kang received only 5 million from the director for filming, and then the director's wife became gloomy. Then she answered Shinha that she would deal with it herself. The girl stated that she said it only because the guy himself was definitely silent. Since Kang had saved her daughter and the entire film, the actress promised to look into it. Shinha thanked her older friend, and her mood immediately improved. Winking playfully at Kang, she suggested that they look for a better place for now. Shinha covered her head to walk with him on the street, but this only made her attract more attention. They came to an area of elite real estate, where apartments were sold in offices. Thanks to the director's influence, the guy's role was recast as a stunt coordinator instead of a stunt double, and his fee immediately increased to 100 million won. So now he could afford a much more comfortable place. The rent was very profitable. The deposit was only 5 million, Shinha said, and Kang was surprised that she knew so much, and then he proudly straightened up again, saying that he treats girls as useful in any situation. Kang appreciated the beautiful view from the window, and Jin appreciated the visibility of the windows and firing positions. He also suggested installing black curtains to limit the enemy's view. The puppeteer suggested using the remaining money to improve mobility and purchase a car. Shinha immediately offered to help with this too, although finding a luxury car for that money would not be easy. And then the guy turned to the girl after waiting a pause. He came close to her and asked why she was so eager to help him. "She doesn't really like him?" the agent asked, his face moving even closer to hers. But before she could say anything, he pulled away, and Shinha began to rant and rave, cursing his conceit. "She's an actress and has a busy schedule. She just had some time and decided to drop in on him. Nothing personal," the embarrassed girl said in her defense. "If it were anyone else in his place, she would have done exactly the same thing," said the cutie and started shouting. Turning back to her, the guy grinned and said it was a joke, and then thanked her for her help. Encouraged by such sincerity, Shinha again fell silent, blushing shyly. "She's not doing this to listen to that kind of talk," the girl protested. Jin said he was also expecting his gratitude, and the guy told him to shut up. But as usual, he said it out loud. He quickly corrected himself, saying that it wasn't for her, and Shinha remembered the day when Kang saved her from the debris that could have seriously injured her. If it weren't for him, she might even have died. The girl dramatized and shyly twirled a lock of hair around her finger. She thought she was fine, but as soon as she was left alone in the house, the realization came to her of what could have happened and did not. Left alone in the huge dark house, she recalled what had happened again and again, and her heart was torn from her chest. This had never happened to her before, but now, whenever she was alone, the girl felt anxious and had nightmares. That's why she hoped that she would feel safe next to the guy, and if he didn't mind, she wanted to visit him more often, the actress blurted out. All this time, Kang just looked out the window and then stretched, as if he hadn't even listened. Later, they went out to a used car lot. Shinha was quite skeptical about this market. There were better cars here, but Kang chose a rusty bucket. The girl didn't mince words, so much so that she even embarrassed the seller. But he wasn't angry. The car really did look bad and was fit for scrap metal, and the cost of repairs could exceed all reasonable limits. Shinha again suggested that they go look some more, but Kang stubbornly wanted to look under the hood. Of course, he wasn't the one who should have looked at the insides. The decision was made by the settler, who could also repair the transport. He had protocols for this case. Luckily, he had a manual even for 100-year-old cars. Jean had already fixed the power system, so there shouldn't have been any problems with the car. So, slamming the hood shut, he told the salesman he was taking the bucket. Shinha even offered to lend him some money if he wanted to save up for something. The seller himself warned that the car was in poor condition and that he wouldn't be held responsible if it stalled en route. Kang agreed but demanded a discount. It was a great deal for him. Renovations next to a new house could arouse suspicion among neighbors, so it was necessary to find a suitable location. The puppeteer had already figured out the metallurgical plant that had recently closed. He had found out everything while they were just walking around. To complete the repairs to the car, he needed spare parts and a quiet corner. That's what they did. Despite Shinha's grumbling, she followed the guy into the abandoned area. She kept bombarding the guy with questions, not understanding why they had brought this bucket here. And Kang asked her to be more polite with the car. It all felt like the beginning of a horror film that 10 men had secretly signed up for. Of course, this was not the case, and Shin Ha looked inside with curiosity. It was a pretty good and spacious room. Kang unloaded all the parts onto the workbench. The girl was surprised that he was going to repair everything here himself. For this, you needed a mechanic's license or something like that, the girl said. And Jean answered her that he was better than any license, although she had not heard him. I watched a couple of videos. Kang answered her half-jokingly. Disassembly is the reverse side of assembly. But what if the car exploded and he took the life he'd saved? Shinha worried. But the guy was rather surprised that she was so sure he'd ride with her. The guy explained to her that this factory had closed because the owner had retired. So Kang rented it for a whole year, surprising Shinha again. Having prepared everything, he opened the hood of his car. Having put on gloves, the agent stared at the girl in surprise. And he asked her how long she would be with him, since she had been following him around like a little tail all day, which earned him a portion of indignation. Shinha began to deny it, saying that it was he who brought her here. But Kang pretended not to understand what they were talking about. Then the proud girl announced she was leaving, and if he got bored, that was his problem. But then the guy reminded her that there was no public transportation in such a remote area. And she, horrified, said that she would simply call her manager. But then she discovered that there was no connection, because they were deep in the mountains. She was trapped, Shinha realized, and by evening the ghosts would come. Kang scared her even more. And then he quietly said that he had planned this from the very beginning. And he asked her what she thought. Why he brought her here. The girl's heart skipped a beat. It can't be, her lips whispered weakly. And she screamed that she was not ready for this. But the agent just wanted her to help with the repairs. Looking at how cheerfully the guy started repairing, Shinha realized that he could have handled it himself, but he just liked to tease her. Shouldn't the order of analysis be written down? The actress asked. In one of the films she watched, someone destroyed such expensive equipment, but the agent remembered everything. Jin immediately objected that he remembered everything, and Kang frowned, asking the puppeteer to shut up. The agent quickly disassembled the engine, and then just as quickly I assembled everything under Jin's guidance. Less than an hour passed. He then ordered Shinha to get behind the wheel for a test drive, and again heard a loud, indignant cry. The girl was still afraid that the car would explode, but Kang assured her that he had calculated everything carefully. After driving for just a short time, they immediately felt the difference. The engine no longer roared like a wounded animal. Kang's list of virtues and talents was once again updated in his eyes. But why does he need a warehouse for a whole year if the repairs went quickly? The apartment in Seoul was the base for living. This warehouse will become a production base, where equipment for missions can be quietly manufactured without arousing suspicion. But Shinha didn't need to know that, Kang replied. And the girl hissed indignantly. The guy decided to take the actress home, and then she decided to ask him. Shin-ho wanted to figure out how to install a smart lighting system that could be controlled from a phone, but Kang immediately suggested asking her parents about it. But they lived far away, and her brother was not very good with his hands, so the guy suggested that she call a specialist. But cutie Shin-ha insisted. She was scared and asked for help. Lately, she kept dreaming about the falling installation and she couldn't sleep. Jin confirmed that this happens to fighters who have gone through their first battle. It resembles post-traumatic stress disorder. Saving civilians is the main task of the United Army of the Earth, Kang suddenly said. Therefore, looking at the girl, he assured her that he would help her. And so Kang went up to the girl's apartment and climbed to the controller to adjust the lighting. A couple of clicks and the agent announced that everything was ready, surprising the girl again. She turned the light on and off several times using the remote control and everything worked fine. The girl thanked him, and again shyly twirled a strand of hair around her finger. Without thinking twice, Kang immediately headed for the door once his work was done. But Shin-ha stopped him and offered him something to eat. She decided to cook something for him, but the guy was skeptical about it. The girl was determined, even though she was going to the club to try his cooking. But since she had already owed him twice today, she would not ask him. There was a small restaurant nearby with a famous chef, about whom they even filmed reports. Jin quickly realized that such establishments were beyond their means, so it would be advantageous to agree in order to better understand the local culture and integrate into society. And then the agent suspected the puppeteer of having gastronomic preferences, but the robot did not respond. Kang agreed, hoping that the food in this place was better than what he cooked. Later, they arrived at an elite restaurant that occupied several floors of a luxurious building. But the guy naturally had never heard of this elite place. The establishment was called Penelope. It was difficult to reserve a table here, but the girl was able to do it yesterday after all. She is Shin-ha, the girl declared, and proudly shook her hair again. Hot, popular beauty, she boasted, but Kang remained indifferent to this, which earned him a portion of indignation. They went inside, and Shin-ha told them that they had met while filming a cooking show with the chef, and that was how they met. And yesterday she took advantage of this to reserve a table for two. She reminded Kang to be grateful to her for such an honor. But then the agent had a question about who she was planning to spend the evening with, since she had booked for two. And Shin-ha suddenly stopped herself, because in fact she was planning to eat at the cafe and just cancel the reservation. To Kang's surprise, they first found themselves not in a restaurant but in a coffee shop, and the girl indignantly asked him if he had never been on a date. First, you need to chat in the coffee shop, so when you get hungry, go up to the 7th floor, the girl explained. The agent examined the cup of cappuccino in front of him and thought, the fact that information about him is on government websites means that perhaps there are records of his ordinary life somewhere. Kang didn't understand at all why he was here and not in the 82nd year in the Earth Alliance. Shin-ha, meanwhile, called the restaurant upstairs to confirm the reservation, and then she jumped up, screaming loudly throughout the cafe. The girl was very worried and started arguing with the administrator, not understanding where her reservation had gone and why she hadn't been warned. Almost in tears, outraged by such injustice, she told Kang that they were crossed off the list because someone more important had arrived. Kang took it calmly and suggested they just go and get some street food. But Shin-ha wouldn't be herself if she left everything as is. After fixing her makeup, the girl declared that she would figure everything out herself. Some visitors to these drinking spots recognized the famous actress and were surprised. For now, the agent decided to just wait and enjoy the local coffee. The guard heard the sound of a bolt being pulled. Then, some unknown people entered the lobby, and he ordered them to stop. There were about 10 of them, all wearing masks and holding steel cases in their hands. The guard realized that these were clearly not masquerade enthusiasts, but robbers. And at that moment, one of the attackers jumped forward. He kicked the guard in the stomach with his knee, and he doubled over. Their target was the restaurant at the top, and the robbers intended to take control of each floor until they reached it. Meanwhile, Shin-ha had already reached the boss and started a scandal. With his bald head shining and his mustache twitching nervously, the boss made excuses that an important person had come to see him. But the girl still demanded to know who dared to take her place. The chef apologized and reminded her that she had booked a table last and not through a waiting list. The girl countered that they could have told her, but then she wouldn't have made that journey. The boss bowed low and apologized. He suggested that she come tomorrow, and then she would receive better service. But for the persistent girl, the word tomorrow did not exist. It would ruin the date plan too much. If she asked the guy to come tomorrow, he would definitely refuse because there would be no excuse. Director Lee Ho, sitting at a table in the Penelope restaurant, was indignant that his brother would not be able to come, even though he himself had asked to reserve a place there the day before the meeting. Lee Ho complained that he couldn't even call his wife because she had her own busy schedule. At this point, they ended their conversation, and the director sighed heavily. He didn't want to eat alone at all, and then he saw a familiar face arguing with the chef. Coming closer, he greeted Shin-ha. The girl said that she didn't come alone but to treat her brother Kang, but her reservation was canceled. And then the director said that this was even better. His meeting was also canceled. He was already upset that he would eat alone, but now they could have dinner together. Lee Ho winked at the girl, but her face hardly became happier. She preferred that he and Kang be left alone. The chef said that this could be arranged since this table was hers from the beginning, and then he realized that he had misspoke. The guy liked the coffee, slightly bitter without any sourness, a delicate creamy foam and no sugar. Jean analyzed the coffee using the agent's taste buds to understand how the drink here differed from what they offered in cafes. While he was waiting, he wrote to Shin-ha that he agreed to just eat soup with her, and explained to Jin that he did it simply out of politeness. He was surprised that Kang had such a trait, and the guy asked if the puppeteer had by any chance experienced some kind of glitch. And then Jin caught the anomaly. Many people in the room lost their network at the same time. The door shutters on the first floor came down with a distinctive sound. Jin listened to gather all the information about his surroundings. On the first floor, the voices of 4 people could be heard. Kang stood up from his seat after hearing worried voices and decided to check everything himself. However, armed men were already spotted on the second floor. Jin caught the sounds of a firearm being reloaded. There was only one way out, and the enemies would appear in 10 seconds, so Jin advised breaking the window. Leap to a swift death, Kang asked. Only the second floor, the puppeteer said coldly. Meanwhile, there was a knock on the villain's door. There were sounds of gunfire and breaking glass. They burst onto the seventh floor and the hall was filled with screams. The villain was told to shut up and go to the corner. Otherwise, it would be the end for everyone. Director Lee Ho couldn't understand what was going on and thought it was some kind of prank. But looking at the boss's face, pale as a billiard ball, he realized that no, this was not a joke. This means that they really did become hostages of the bandits. Shin-ha worriedly asked what they should do, and the director told her to do whatever she was told, or almost whatever, and to remain quiet. She told Lee Ho that Brother Kang was now on the second floor, and she decided to call him so that he would come and save them. But at that very second, she felt the weight of a gun barrel at her temple. The masked bastard said that phones are prohibited, although there is still no connection right now. Shin-ha suddenly started and spread her arms in surprise. The criminal pointed the barrel at the corner and he and the director complied. The girl could only hope that Kang would sort everything out himself. But Lee Ho was skeptical. No matter how strong Kang was, everyone was equal in front of a gun, and in his place he would get out of here. The guy was still thinking over his plan of action. Saving civilians is the primary task of Earth Alliance soldiers, he said. So, escape is not for them, the guy said, his eyes flashing with icy determination.